Chapter 10:28. From afar, the main string looked like a gigantic pillar of light. No one knew how long it was, and the only thing they knew was that it ran through the entire universe, connecting the entrances to various dimensions. Without it, no life or object would be able to break through their original latitude and enter the higher or lower dimensions of the universe. Especially when one entered the area covered by the pillar of light, they could immediately feel the energy that was constantly being emitted in all directions. These energies would gradually form a stable, physical form after being separated from the pillar of light for tens or even hundreds of light years. This also meant that it was extremely dangerous to approach the main string without protection. The slightest carelessness would cause one to disintegrate into the most basic particles under the impact of the energy. When he passed through the outer layer and entered the core area, Zhang Cheng could even feel his extremely tough metal skin that could withstand temperatures of tens of millions of degrees Celsius, actually showing signs of melting and disintegrating. With his current physical strength, he would not suffer even the slightest bit of damage, even if he directly entered the interior of a star. But now, just the energy emitted by the main string was undoubtedly enough to cause terrifying damage to him. Interesting. Is this the most powerful force I've seen so far? Zhang Cheng's eyes emitted a scorching glow as he admired the endless white area before him. Unlike what he saw in the outside world, once he entered the main string, time, space, and dimensions all ceased to exist. All he could see was white light. If it were not for the powerful innate senses of the Titans, ordinary people would not even be able to distinguish their direction. It would not take long for them to be trapped in this area of nothingness where there was no fixed entrance and it was difficult to find an exit. Fortunately, Zhang Cheng was not one of these unlucky fellows. Not only did he quickly find a stable energy flow, but he also relied on the blessing of the rules of death to hear the agonizing cries of countless souls in the depths of the endless white light. As there was no flow of time, he had no idea how long he had been wandering around, let alone what had happened outside during this time. As the cries of his souls got closer and clearer, he finally saw a large black area at the end of the white light. It was like a deep swamp pit, densely packed with all kinds of souls. It was obvious that this was the beginning and end of the rules of death, one of the embodiments of the ultimate order of the universe. I see. Zhang Cheng narrowed his eyes, revealing a thoughtful expression. Strings are the manifestation of countless laws. It was neither pure energy nor pure matter. Instead, it was an omnipresent law. Therefore, if you want to grasp the power of the main chord, you must have a deep understanding of these laws, and then integrate your own will into it. While he was mumbling to himself, the soul of the Lord of the Abyss suddenly jumped out of the black swamp and shouted at the top of its lungs, "Master, great and evil master, save me. Take me away from this damned place." "Oh, you still have a clear consciousness." Zhang Cheng was slightly surprised. This was because most of the surrounding souls had completely lost themselves under the corrosion of the black mud. The more serious ones did not even move, allowing the mud to slowly devour them. Of course I retain my consciousness. I remember everything that happened to me." The Lord of the Abyss was obviously not a fool. He hurriedly mentioned the hero experiment that had been carried out not long ago. He knew very well how cruel and evil his master was. If he lost his value, he would definitely not have a good ending. This is really an unexpected surprise. However, it's too troublesome to save you. I don't want to be contaminated by the black liquid, so it's easier to directly read your memory. Zhang Cheng pursed his lips and a cold smile appeared on his face. He directly controlled the law of death to tear open the soul of the Lord of the Abyss and extracted the part of the memory he wanted. Through a simple reading, he quickly discovered that the so-called hero transformation was actually a process of fusion and replacement. Simply put, it was to let the individual who had transformed into a hero form a connection with some powerful souls in the black swamp, and even use half of the other party's soul to replace half of one's own soul. In the end, one could achieve the goal of controlling part of the laws of the main chord. However, during the entire process, a control device was required. Otherwise, when the corrosion exceeded 50%, the experimental body's entire soul would be extracted, and it would become a lifeless shell. There is no doubt that this device was only available in the Pagoda Alliance Empire. Therefore, all the unlucky people in the organization who participated in the hero transformation became fools or idiots without exception. Helpless, the initiators could only install biochips on them and use remote control to fight. After figuring this out, Zhang Cheng slowly took out the extremely condensed dark planet from his pocket and muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear. Life, death, time, space, energy, matter. All the laws that were produced after the realization were like cords that stood tall in the depths of the universe. If I want to control it, I have to give up a part of myself and let myself completely integrate into the universe. This price is a little scary, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, I've already given up so much. It doesn't matter if I give up another part. As soon as he finished speaking, he gently tossed the dark planet high into the sky, and then his entire soul separated from his body and released the energy he had accumulated in one breath. The next second, boom, a violent explosion spread out in the form of energy waves from the depths of the main cord. The fleet that was originally stationed near the main cord all disappeared in the blink of an eye. What was even more shocking was that the main cord itself gradually dimmed with the unimaginable, terrifying explosion. When the last ray of white light completely dissipated, the remnants of the fleet that had yet to recover from the shock stared in disbelief at the huge figure in the center of the main cord through the detector. He was so ethereal, as if he could disappear at any time. But for some reason, this flickering state became more and more stable with the passage of time and finally condensed into a substance. When the initiators standing in the War Fortress saw this scene, an extremely gloomy expression appeared on their faces. They clenched their fists tightly and whispered, "No, impossible. How could he do this to this extent?" Completely integrating into the main cord and becoming the realization of the laws of the universe. This is something that even I have not been able to do. Damn it, I have to speed up my plan. I must not fail at the last moment. No one can stop me from becoming eternal. No one. Chapter 1029. Just as Zhang Cheng stood in the deep space without any signs of waking up, the Pagoda Alliance decisively gathered their forces and launched a fierce attack on the remaining remnants of the organization. They even sent out 12 heroes in one go. With the help of these terrifying high-end combat forces, the defense line built by the organization collapsed in an instant. There was no chance to escape or retreat. Seeing that the situation was beginning to develop toward the worst situation, the initiator made a prompt decision. He sent all the incomplete heroes he had made in a hurry into the battlefield. With a strong fighting style that was completely unafraid of death, they blocked the tsunami-like attacks of the enemy. As for the trump cards installed in the stronghold, they were not stingy at all. Light of Creation, Annihilation Black Hole, Nova Cannon, all kinds of powerful weapons appeared one after another. For a time, there was almost no safety in the entire battlefield. Even powerful individuals like the heroes would be seriously injured if not killed. Even the frontline combatants left the stronghold and entered the universe. They began to launch surprise attacks again and again according to the predetermined plan. However, as the highest commander, the initiator did not stay in the command room to watch the fierce battle outside. Instead, he ran alone to the lowest level of the stronghold to meet his old friend. As soon as he walked into the room, before he could say anything, the man wearing glasses spoke first. "I think you must be very shocked right now, and your heart is filled with fear, right? Why do you say that?" The initiator asked with a gloomy face. "It's very simple. Because someone who was supposed to be a chess piece has grown far faster than you expected. Abandoning part of himself and becoming one with the main string, I have to admit that he is indeed very crazy. Crazy to the point that there is no cure for him. Even you can't do that." The man wearing the glasses replied calmly. He did not look flustered at all. When he spoke, he did not forget to fiddle with the instrument in his hand. "That's right. This guy is a madman. A real madman. The most important thing for an intelligent life is self. If he can even give up this, then he is no different from an emotionless machine. I even suspect that when he wakes up, it will be the beginning of our destruction. Help me. I know you have always wanted to live as a human. The initiator gritted his teeth and made a request. As the founder of the organization, he knew very well how powerful the soul and brain of this seemingly powerless ordinary person before him was. When he was forced to work for the Pagoda Empire, he invented more than 200 earth-shattering works in one go. At the same time, he also obtained the title of smartest brain in the universe. To be exact, without the help of this man in front of him, he wouldn't have been able to expand the organization to its current extent, let alone fight an all-out war with the Pagoda Alliance. The man stopped what he was doing and turned to look at his old friend. After a full minute, he asked, "How do you want me to help you?" Of course, it's to complete that plan. What I need now is a power that is on par with his. The initiator stated his intention without hesitation. That was right. He wanted to activate that insane fusion plan. By slaughtering himself in different worlds, he would cause the string to vibrate and create a main string out of thin air. From there, he would obtain supreme power. Only by doing so would he be able to contend against Zhang Cheng, who had already devoured and fused with his main cord. You should understand that this plan has a fatal flaw. The more you devour yourself in parallel worlds, the less likely you will be able to maintain your independent will. If things go wrong, you might even develop multiple personalities. In a way, what you are giving up is no different from what he is giving up. The man with the glasses gave a meaningful warning. Of course, devouring oneself in parallel universes didn't have to worry too much about the rejection of one's thoughts and soul. They could basically digest and absorb everything. But the problem was that too much digestion and absorption could cause problems. In particular, a large amount of sealed memories and emotions would constantly affect the main personality. The longer the time, the greater the impact. In the end, it was only a matter of time before a secondary personality was born. The initiator laughed self-deprecatingly. Do you think I have a choice now? Not only him, but the master of the Pagoda Alliance, that monster who calls himself the Emperor, is also there. Sorry, dear friend, but I have no way out. Come on, I'm ready. Well, since you have thought it through, let's begin this great plan. First, you should know what you're going to do. As he spoke, the man took out a crude dagger from his pocket. It was made of some kind of stone. The difference between it and a normal dagger was that the tip of the dagger was engraved with hundreds of large and small runes. Each rune shone with a dazzling light. The initiator didn't say anything. He took the dagger and turned to leave. About 10 minutes later, he used the dagger to pierce the heart of a female member. The moment she breathed her last in shock and confusion, one of the runes at the tip of the dagger suddenly extinguished. Then a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth. Not long after, all the members in the stronghold were slaughtered. Then he called back the soldiers on the front lines and killed them one by one. Interestingly, no matter how many times the body had evolved and modified, it couldn't resist this seemingly crude weapon. Every time, it was a fatal blow, even if it only scratched a layer of skin. When the last unlucky person other than Zhang Cheng was killed, the initiator returned with the dagger covered in blood. He handed it to his old friend and whispered, "Here, I have completed the first step. Hurry up. We don't have much time left. Stand up on the platform. Remember, no matter what happens later, you must hold on. Otherwise, the moment the main cords are formed, your consciousness and soul will disappear. What will replace them will be a brand new, unthinking law." The man wearing a pair of spectacles instructed as he quickly turned on the complicated instrument beneath his feet. Not long after, a violent vibration reverberated in the lowest level of the stronghold. The next second, woo woo woo. The ear-piercing sound seemed to directly hit the soul. Every clone who heard it couldn't help but kneel on the ground. Their bodies trembled crazily, and finally, their genes collapsed. All the cells quickly died and turned into puddles of stinky, gelatinous substance. Chapter 10:30. Strange. Bizarre. There was no theory that could explain the amazing scene in front of them. Even the war fortress, which was built with countless cutting-edge technology, couldn't withstand the invisible shock and finally fell apart, becoming floating garbage in space. Shortly after the huge fortress fell apart, a brilliant white light penetrated the entire universe. It was like a torch in the dark, looking so bright and dazzling. In the center of the white light beam, a vague figure could be seen. The moment the figure walked out, it suddenly raised its right index finger high and pointed at a spot not far away. Instantly, the fleets and heroes that originally belonged to the Pagoda Alliance all disintegrated in an unbelievable way and eventually died. No words could describe this power that was far beyond the scope of ordinary people's understanding. There's also nothing that could organize this power to work. To be precise, it was like some kind of highest-level objective law in the universe. Every time it was activated, it would take effect 100% of the time. As the fierce battle around the area fell into silence again, the initiator lowered his head and stared at an escape pod wrapped in countless protective powers. He said in a slightly emotional tone, "My dear old friend, do you see this? Our plan succeeded. I am now one of the greatest life forms in the entire universe, and I have mastered the basic law that maintains the operation of the universe." "Yes, I see. How do you feel now?" The man with the goggles used the device inside the capsule to convey his message to the other party. "Feel?" The initiator shook his head blankly. "Sorry, I don't know how to describe my current state. I can feel that I have lost something important, and to some extent, I am bound by an invisible force." "So, you have become part of the law." The man wearing glasses keenly grasped the key point. "Yes. From now on, I am the main cord, the basic rule that maintains the operation of the entire universe. I control almost endless power, but at the same time, I also need to maintain the most basic balance. I can no longer destroy as recklessly as before." After that, the initiator raised his left hand and created a huge galaxy with hundreds of thousands of stars in his palm. Then, he pointed at the area in the distance that had been ravaged by the war. In the blink of an eye, these tiny planets began to swell and fill up the empty space, forming a brand new galaxy. Without a doubt, this kind of power was far beyond the reach of the gods. It was something that only the true creator could do. "I see. I think I understand now." The man with the sunglasses nodded thoughtfully. "What do you plan to do next? Should I find that guy who calls himself the Emperor and take revenge, or should I deal with my other self first?" No, there was no rush. Now that I have an endless amount of time, I can slowly think about what to do next. In any case, it will still be a long time before he wakes up from his slumber. At that time, we can decide whether we should continue to be allies or go our separate ways. "Understood. Then I'll go into hibernation mode and wait for your decision." "That's the best." After a short exchange, the green light that was constantly flashing in the escape pod quickly turned red. The person inside was also lying in a sealed container, entering a low-temperature hibernation state. Just like that, time flew by. After an unknown amount of time, Zhang Cheng, who was standing in space, finally opened his eyes slowly and looked around with interest. After a good 3 to 5 minutes, he chuckled and muttered to himself, "This is the ultimate power of the universe, fusing all the laws into one's body." "Ah, you're finally awake." Accompanied by a familiar voice, the initiator once again walked out of the pillar of light with a faint smile on his face. "Oh, you seem to have done the same thing as me." Zhang Cheng's eyes revealed a look of surprise. As a lunatic who had fused himself with the main string, it was naturally impossible for him not to feel the ability that the initiator had inadvertently revealed. If he had to use a more accurate term to describe it, it was more or less like a three-dimensional image that had been forcibly inserted into a two-dimensional plane. After all, the string did not only create the entire universe. It also contained the ultimate order and law that maintained its operation. Fundamentally speaking, the string was equivalent to the highest latitude of the universe, belonging to the power that surpassed everything. Therefore, once a creature grasped the main string, it would have a strange feeling that it was incompatible with the entire universe. The initiator clearly had no intention of hiding it and replied generously, "That's right. Although the methods we used were different, the final result was almost the same. Now, you and I are the only two survivors of the organization, and also two of the most powerful individuals in the universe. How about it? Are you interested in practicing with me, defeating the other strong enemies together, and bringing the entire universe into our control? Is this an invitation?" Zhang Cheng asked with a half-smile. "Sort of. In any case, it's much better to join forces with another version of yourself than to do it alone. Don't forget, there are still some old fellows who have been in this field for who knows how long. Their use of power and laws is not something that newcomers like you and me can compare to." As he spoke, the initiator took the initiative to extend his right hand. Unfortunately, Zhangqing clearly had no intention of shaking hands with him. He sneered and asked in return, "Do you think that after all that we've been through, I'll still choose to believe you? If you don't mind me asking, where did those so-called brothers and sisters of the organization go?" "They're right here." The initiator pointed at his chest. "Perfect fusion. Their thoughts, souls, willpower. I've perfectly preserved all of them. Of course, perhaps you don't agree with this method, but it's undeniable that the entire organization has not disappeared. Instead, it has become more perfect and harmonious. Come, work with me hand in hand, and I guarantee that you'll get everything you want." "No, thank you. I've already gotten what I want. Next, I'll use my own method to complete the ultimate transcendence. Nothing can stop me. Nothing can restrain me. I'm free, whether it's my mind or my soul. Also, I sincerely suggest that you don't do anything stupid. Otherwise, I'll let you understand that even life forms like you and me will eventually face death." As soon as he finished speaking, Zhang Cheng's entire body quickly disappeared into the omnipresent dark matter in the universe, as if he had never appeared. Chapter 1031. "So you're saying that he rejected you?" Not long after Zhang Cheng left, the man in the escape pod quickly woke up from his dormant state and asked with a frown. The initiator nodded without hesitation. "That's right. He doesn't trust me. Or rather, he didn't give me the slightest bit of trust from the beginning. He's like a cold and cunning lone wolf. He doesn't fit in with any group and won't pour even the slightest bit of emotion into an outsider. Do you still remember Old Chin? Normally, as the guide of the trial, that guy should more or less retain a certain amount of emotion, but after he learned that I swallowed Old Chin's soul, he didn't show the slightest bit of anger. If I remember correctly, you seem to still have something in your hands, something that can have a considerable impact on him. Why don't you take it out and force him to join?" The man wearing glasses asked bluntly. "Yes, I do have that thing, but the problem is that it can only be used once. Now is not the time. You should understand what I mean." The initiator said as he took out a shining soul fragment from the light pillar. "What a perfect soul fragment. I'm afraid that even if we search the entire universe, we won't be able to find a second one. I can't believe it. How could someone like him let a part of his soul wander outside?" The man narrowed his eyes and muttered to himself. "Everyone has a weakness. No matter how strong, how cold, how ruthless, there will always be a trace of softness in the depths of their hearts. Maybe he didn't notice it, so I caught it." When he said this, the initiator didn't have a trace of pride on his face. It was as if he was describing a simple cause and effect relationship. "Then how do you plan to use it?" "Of course, at a critical moment, I'll use it to turn the situation around. What I need to do now is to use this unparalleled power to destroy the Pagoda Alliance and draw out the Emperor hiding behind the scenes. I suggest you start from the neighboring star system." "I think so too." While the two were talking, Zhang Cheng had already crossed dimensions and appeared in another part of the starry sky. He stared at the guy blocking his way. The other party was obviously not a human, at least not an earthling. Instead, it was a mysterious creature with scales all over its body, a dozen tentacles, and an onion-like flat and round head. He hesitated for a moment and immediately greeted Joshua through the telepathic connection. "Greetings, new ruler." Ruler? It was obvious that this was the first time Zhang Cheng had heard of such a title. A hint of curiosity flashed through his eyes. Yes, the Sovereign. This is the name given to all those who can control the power of the main flux. The mysterious life form hurriedly explained. So you're also a sovereign? Zhang Cheng continued to ask with interest. That's right. I'm also a sovereign. To be precise, he is one of the 30 remaining dominators in the entire universe. However, if you include you and the other guy, that should be 32. The mysterious creature gave a straightforward answer. It could be seen that he was not hostile at all, nor did he want to fight or take advantage of the situation. Zhang Cheng had undoubtedly noticed this as well. He smiled and asked, "Oh, esteemed ruler, why are you suddenly blocking my path?" The mysterious life form waved his dozen tentacles and quickly said through the telepathic connection, "I'm a messenger. I represent one of the ultimate powers in the universe, chaos, and I'm inviting you. Join us and become one of us." Chaos? Is that the name of some organization? Zhang Cheng sharply grasped the keyword. Organization? No, no, no. We represent the highest level of life in the entire universe. Nothing can restrain us. Just like I said, chaos is one of the ultimate powers in the entire universe. All dominators who agree with it are our allies. Besides us, there's also one who represents order and one who represents neutrality. Before the two of you were born, the power of the entire universe was balanced. Every faction had 10 dominators. But now, this balance has been broken. Believe me, if you reject our good intentions, those who agree with order and neutrality will definitely attack you. That's because your actions don't seem like you agree with order or neutrality. When he said this, the mysterious life form's tone was full of playfulness and ridicule. Just as he described, Zhang Cheng's actions clearly did not belong to order or neutrality. Instead, he was completely chaotic. He did not care about what the universe would become, nor did he care about how many galaxies his actions would destroy and how many civilizations would perish. I need some time to think about it. After a moment of silence, Zhang Cheng did not immediately give an answer. Needless to say, he was not in a hurry to make a choice when faced with a domain that he had never come into contact with. On the contrary, the most important thing now was not to join any faction, but to find a deserted place and figure out the various abilities he had obtained. No problem. Whenever you've thought it through, you can contact me anytime. One last reminder, be careful of those people from the Order faction. They might already be plotting how to get rid of you. As the last word echoed in the depths of his mind, the mysterious life form instantly sank into the dark matter and disappeared without a trace. After confirming that he had really left, Zhang Cheng did not intend to stay in the same place and continued his journey. As a dominator, one of the most powerful abilities was that he could directly travel to any corner of the universe without using the main string. After confirming that he had shaken off all pursuers, he found a relatively secluded planet and descended from the sky in his human form, forcefully smashing a huge crater with a diameter of over 100 meters deep in the depths of a dense primeval forest. The surrounding animals were so frightened that they fled in all directions. There's an atmosphere. There's oxygen. The flora and fauna are more than 50% similar to Earth. The air is filled with magical energy. Looks like there should be intelligent life living here. Zhang Cheng muttered to himself as he observed the surrounding environment. However, after looking around and finding no traces of civilization, he quickly gave up on continuing his search. Instead, he raised his hand and snapped his fingers, building a magic tower in the depths of the forest. He walked in alone and began to experiment day and night with the power of the rules that he had mastered. It should be known that every main string had a different emphasis in terms of rules. He needed to figure out which aspect of the rule that he had devoured was the most outstanding. Chapter 1032. At the far end of the high-dimensional universe, there was a dark red star. Its name was Taruka, which translated to the most distant planet. To a certain extent, it was indeed worthy of this name. However, the reason why Taruka was famous was not because of its distance, but because it was the home planet of the first ruler of the Chaos faction. It was a special planet that had existed since the birth of the universe. At this moment, In this place that had been abandoned by the original inhabitants due to the depletion of resources and energy, 9 creatures of different appearances were gathered in a religious stone house, patiently waiting for something. After about 2 to 3 hours, a mysterious creature with tentacles all over its body suddenly appeared out of thin air. It bowed to the huge figure on the main seat. "According to your request, I have sent him an invitation letter. However, what is interesting is that he is very cautious, and it seems that he has not fully grasped the power he just obtained." "Oh, what did he say?" The huge figure let out a low voice that echoed around. "He said that he needs some time to think about it. However, I think that he should find a place where no one is around to slowly familiarize himself with the power of the strings until he is sure that he can fully control it. Otherwise, he will not show himself." The tentacle monster replied in a relaxed tone. "Ha ha, very good. It seems that it is only a matter of time before he becomes one of us. What about the other one?" The huge figure laughed and continued to ask. "The other one is more troublesome. Before we could find him, our Deathlands found him first. Therefore, he seems to be more inclined to join the Order. Do you think we should take some action to eliminate the threat before it is too late?" The tentacle monster carefully probed. The huge figure gently shook its head. "No, it is not time yet. Although the universe will eventually return to its original state and chaos, the power of order is still strong. We need to wait for the best time. So, we're just going to watch the expansion of order? You should know that the self-proclaimed emperor has seized at least 6 main strings." Another unknown creature with a round body voiced his doubts. "Relax, my friend. Don't forget, his endless expansion has brought us 2 new rulers, and both of them have quite a bit of enmity with him. Therefore, even if one of them joins the order, do you think there will be internal problems?" The huge figure explained meaningfully. "I see. Then, today's meeting will end here. I hope that the next time we meet, we will gather together to discuss how to destroy order and let the universe return to chaos. Hail to the great chaos. You are the origin and end of all things. Salute." As the juggernauts left the dark red planet one by one, Zhang Cheng, who was hiding in the depths of the planet's jungle, ran into a little trouble. To be more precise, it was a group of creatures that were 70 to 80% similar to human beings. They broke into the tower that he had built with crude weapons and armor in their hands. They even shattered an inferior puppet that was made of clay and rocks. At this moment, these guys had already begun to wield weapons such as daggers, war hammers, axes, and the like, crazily prying the gold and jewels synthesized with alchemy from the walls, the floor, and the decorations. Their movements were so skillful that it was simply amazing. Obviously, this was not their first time doing this. There is no doubt that they were the special professions on this planet, such as mercenaries and adventurers. This was especially true for the young-looking man, who actually possessed a certain degree of magical power. The 2 fatal injuries that the puppet had suffered earlier were the result of his incantation and casting spells. Otherwise, with the primitive and backward cold weapons that had not been enchanted, they could only tickle the puppet at most. Even if they hammered it 100 times, they might not even be able to see its energy core. Admiring this group of invaders or robbers who were crazily plundering the bottom floor of the tower, Zhang Cheng could not help but curl the corners of his mouth slightly. He muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "Interesting. Adventure? Then let me play with you for a while. Treat it as a way to relax and adjust my mood." As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hand and gently snapped his fingers. Pa! Instantly, the decorative metal statues that stood on both sides of the corridor at the bottom floor suddenly came to life. "Be careful. Damn it, these armors can move. Dodge quickly." Accompanied by loud shouts and reminders, the excited group immediately threw away the treasures in their hands that were priceless to them, quickly grabbed their weapons and shields, and entered battle mode. Of course, since it was a game, Zhang Cheng did not really intend to kill all these interesting invaders. Instead, he gave them a chance to defeat the animated armors. After all, the most important thing in a game was fairness. Otherwise, it would quickly lose its fun. If he really wanted to get rid of these invaders, with the power that he had now, he did not even need to snap his fingers. He could make them disappear into thin air with just a thought. Damn it, the strength of these armors is too strong. Don't fight recklessly. They turn very slowly. Try to use their pace and distance to attack the joints of their legs. A rather old man roared at the top of his voice. Easy for you to say. This was the highest grade of steel. My sword can only leave a white mark on it at most. Not far away, a woman avoided the attack of the animated armor and rolled her eyes in annoyance. Magic. We need the help of magic. Islands. Can you still hold on? The man turned around and glanced at the young man who was protected in the middle. Leave it to me. The latter did not say a word of nonsense. He immediately raised the wooden staff in his hand and began to chant loudly. After a while, he completed the preparation of the spell. He suddenly pressed his right hand on the ground and chanted the last note from his mouth. Suddenly, the floor of the entire room suddenly became as smooth as a mirror. As the armors were made of metal and heavy, they slipped and fell down with clanking sounds. No matter how hard they struggled, they could not stand up. In contrast, although the team wearing leather boots was also affected, they still retained a certain degree of friction. They quickly rushed forward and dismantled the animated armors into pieces to resolve the crisis. However, before everyone could sit down and take a breather, a voice suddenly echoed inside the tower. Wonderful cooperation. I have to admit that you have given me a small surprise. In return, you can rest for 12 hours and enjoy delicious food and soft beds. I guarantee that you will not be attacked in any way during this period. However, after 12 hours, there will be an even more exciting game waiting for you to participate. Remember, do not try to escape because you have no ability to walk out of this tower. It will only be a waste of time and energy. Chapter 1033. Like most of the time, Zhang Cheng's way of doing things was either unpredictable and confusing, or he was straightforward and did not give the other party a chance to resist. Obviously, he chose the latter this time. After announcing the rules of the game, he completely ignored the pitiful wretches in the lower level of the tower who were staring at each other in bewilderment. He directly turned off the alchemical device used for communication and observation. Sitting on the chair alone, he muttered to himself, maybe I could try to test the power of the string and create a few interesting creatures. At the same time, the team members at the bottom of the tower finally regained their senses and shouted anxiously. Who was it who was talking just now? Come out. Don't be sneaky. Shut up. Idiot. Are you trying to get us killed? The only spellcaster in the team tugged at his companion. If there was anyone in the team who understood this mysterious tower the most, it would be him. Other things aside, just the encounter with the mud golem and the animated armor was enough to prove that the owner of the tower was a powerful spellcaster. Angering such a person was likely to lead to death without even knowing how it happened. What's wrong? Why are you pulling me? The muscular man obviously didn't realize how dangerous his actions were. He blinked his eyes innocently. Why? Of course it's to survive. Haven't you noticed? From the moment we entered the tower, we were targeted by the other party. Excluding the mud golems guarding the door, the animated armors we encountered just now were obviously deliberately awakened by the owner of this tower to play a game with us. Use your walnut-sized brain properly. If they summon other monsters, do you think we can deal with them in our current state? The young man explained, gritting his teeth. So, you mean we have to endure for now? The middle-aged man took a deep breath, his eyes full of vigilance. That's right. Not only do we have to endure, we also have to. Before the young man could finish his words, a tightly shut door suddenly opened, and a dozen maids carrying delicate silver trays walked out. These soulless walking corpses, who had just been created, had the exact same smile on their faces. They placed the steaming hot food on the table in the hall and cleaned up the traces of a fight. After doing all this, they left behind a few bottles of expensive wine and disappeared behind the door. Not a single sound was made throughout the entire process, and there was no so-called communication. Shocking. Fear. Numbness. The 6 people in the team rubbed their eyes almost at the same time, as if they couldn't believe what they were seeing. It wasn't until the aroma of the food began to permeate the air that the muscular man couldn't help but swallow his saliva. He asked in an uncertain tone, This food shouldn't be poisonous. Is it edible? What do you think? The young man did not answer immediately. Instead, he turned around and asked the petite figure who had been hiding in the dark a few meters away. Without another word, the latter immediately went to the food, pulled out his dagger, and carefully dipped it in the gravy. Then he placed it on the tip of his tongue and licked it for a full 5 minutes. Only then did he reply, "It's not poisonous. At least there's no poison that I know of." "Awesome. I've been in the forest for half a month, and I'm about to starve to death. Today, we can finally have a good meal." When a muscular man heard that there was no poison, he didn't even hesitate. He grabbed a whole deer that was roasted to a golden brown and opened his mouth to devour it. Not long after, a hind leg that weighed at least 5 kilograms was mostly gnawed off. Seeing that he was fine even after eating so much, the rest of the people also let go of their hands and feet and began to devour the various sumptuous food on the table. However, they didn't know whether it was out of caution or the fact that the intelligent life on this planet that was 70 to 80% similar to humans didn't like wine. In short, they didn't touch the few bottles of exquisite red wine. After eating and drinking to their fill, the middle-aged man who seemed to be the leader wiped his mouth and stared at the disappearing entrance behind him. "Let's hear it. What should we do next? Or rather, how can we leave this place alive? There's no doubt we've broken into the home of a powerful spellcaster. However, he doesn't seem to have any intention of killing us. He just wants to play a game with us or do some experiments on us. Thinking of the worst, we may never be able to leave this place. On the bright side, at least we don't have to worry about dying of hunger, thirst, or exhaustion. Moreover, since it's a game, it means that there's a possibility of winning." The young man who could release magic took the initiative to analyze. "Can't we talk to him?" The only female in the group frowned subconsciously. "Talk. Who do you think you are? Qualified to negotiate with a powerful spellcaster? No, my foolish friend. In his eyes, we may very well be like ants that can be crushed at any time. Our only value is to provide some entertainment. Don't try to ruin this fun, or we may die without a burial place in the next second." The young man warned in a heavy tone. "Damn it. Does that mean we're going to die no matter what?" "Not necessarily. Maybe when he's in a good mood, he'll throw away toys like us that he's tired of playing with. Anyway, don't think too much about it for now. Rest well and wait for the game to start. Also, don't waste your energy trying to escape. According to my observation, this tower itself is alive. It can automatically open or close any door or directly seal off any existing passage. Damn it. If we knew that this place was so dangerous, we wouldn't have come in. Huh. I don't know who was the one who shouted excitedly just now. This adventure is definitely the best decision of his life. He even planned to use the gold, silver, and jewelry to buy a manor and enjoy the wonderful rest of his life. Don't tell me you don't regret it. Of course I regret it, but the problem is, it's useless to regret it now. Forget it. Talking to you about this is a complete waste of time. Take the time to rest. God knows what will be waiting for us in 12 hours. I hope it won't be too hopeless." While the team members in the lower level of the tower were bickering, Zhang Cheng, who was in the upper level, had already entered into a working state. He manipulated the powerful rule power that originated from the universe, creating creatures of different shapes and abilities, but not much strength. After a period of trial and experience, he had gradually learned a lot of knowledge and skills. It was just that he had not found out which of the main chords he had swallowed was the advantage and which was the disadvantage. In addition, he was also vaguely aware that there were huge contradictions and oppositions within the entire universe. He had to make a choice at some point, and this choice would be related to the future development and the ultimate direction of the universe. Chapter 1034. 12 hours wasn't a long time, but it wasn't short either. When the clock on the lower floor of the tower kept ringing, Zhang Cheng's familiar voice reverberated in the surroundings again. Rest time is over. Game begins. The next second, 4 entrances suddenly appeared out of thin air in the thick rock wall. Then, 4 monsters with sharp spikes all over their bodies and hot lava flowing on their bodies slowly walked out. Their size was not too outrageous. They were only slightly taller than an adult lion, but their lethality was definitely much higher than the former. Especially the strange saliva that kept dripping on the ground, and the sharp fangs and claws, all of which meant that if one was knocked down, the chances of survival were basically zero. The adventure team members who were resting on the soft ground saw this scene, and stood up one after another. Their faces were full of nervousness and fear. Damn it, who the F***CK can tell me what this thing is? The muscular man gripped the weapon in his hand tightly, hoping that the cold touch of the steel could give him a limited sense of security. Don't ask me. How would I know? Anyway, what we need to do is to kill them all. The only female in the team rolled her eyes in annoyance. She tried to ease the pressure with a slightly relaxed way of speaking. After all, anyone who was not an idiot could tell that the four monsters that suddenly appeared in front of them were definitely not the ordinary carnivorous beasts in the forest, but some kind of artificial life form. Before they officially came into contact with them, no one knew what special abilities they had, or if their strength and agility were far above average. Hey, buddy, this time it's all up to you. The middle-aged man gave a look to the young man beside him. Understood. The young man understood and took a deep breath. Before the monsters took the initiative to attack, he took the lead and began to chant a spell. After a short 3 to 5 seconds, he suddenly released a bone-chilling cold from his palm. It quickly swept toward one of the targets that was more than 10 meters in front of him. Instantly, the hot lava flowing on the surface of the monster's skin began to solidify rapidly, although it madly charged the moment it was attacked. Before it could run halfway, it fell to the ground because of the lack of coordination of its limbs. It slammed into a thick stone pillar and finally shattered into pieces of gray stone that emitted hot steam. They're afraid of cold and water. The young man who succeeded in his attack reminded his companions loudly. Unfortunately, there was no water source in the hall on the first floor. Even the water that the team drank was brought in by the previous maid. There was less than half a jar left. Without any hesitation, the muscular man immediately picked up the heavy water jar and threw it at another monster. Clang! Following the clear sound of the jar hitting the wall, a total of 20 liters of water gushed out, all of it splashing onto the monster's body. When the cold water came into contact with the boiling lava, a large amount of white steam suddenly emerged, enveloping the entire bottom floor of the tower, forming a white fog. Oh no! 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 Idiot! What have you done? The middle-aged man could only watch helplessly as the white fog completely blocked his vision. He could not help but cry out in pain and despair. If he could, he really wished that he could have stopped his teammates' idiotic behavior. One had to know that the biggest difference between intelligent creatures and wild beasts was that most intelligent creatures relied far more on their sense of sight than on their sense of hearing and smell. Once they lost the advantage of their sight, the result was obvious. But now, there was actually an idiot who had sealed his own vision advantage. Nervous, exciting, careful. When the white fog completely occupied the entire enclosed space, the adventurer team stood back to back, continuously trying to use stools, chairs, cups, plates, and other props to throw in all directions, trying to confirm the position of the other two monsters. But unfortunately, the things they threw out did not hit anything in the end. Just as the psychological pressure was increasing, a bright red figure suddenly jumped out of the white fog, pouncing over from above. Go to hell. The muscular man raised his axe with a ferocious expression and was the first to meet it. Bang! After a muffled sound, the axe embedded itself into the monster's abdomen, and a large amount of boiling blood that could melt steel spurted out. His exposed skin was instantly severely burned, and even the double layer of hard leather armor was ignited, emitting a charred smell. Tragic. In just one round, the muscular man was forced out of the ranks of the battle, falling to the ground and frantically tearing at the severe burns on his body and letting out a blood-curdling scream. Although this kind of burn was far from fatal, the pain it brought was incomparable to scratches and bites. Oleg. When the women in the team saw this scene, they immediately shouted the other party's name and raised the spear in their hands, fiercely stabbing it into the monster's open, bloody mouth. A fatal blow. Excluding those special species with super recovery abilities that were almost unkillable, normal life forms would not be able to withstand the enormous damage caused by piercing through the body. Thus, in less than 5 seconds, the shockingly high temperature emitted by this monster quickly cooled down, turning into a solid body that was as hard as a statue. When everyone's attention was attracted by the injured muscular man, the last monster silently approached the young man who had released the magic, pouncing at lightning speed, preparing to bite off the neck of its prey. But it completely did not notice that the moment it leaped, the short figure that had been hiding in the dark all this time also jumped up. More importantly, this short fellow suddenly opened his hands, as if he was releasing something invisible to the naked eye into the air. The next second, puff! A ferocious large head rolled off from its neck, and bright, boiling blood spurted out like an arrow, scorching the ceiling that was inlaid with gold and silver decorations. Without a doubt, what he had released was not anything else but an extremely thin, tough, and heat-resistant thread. With an unbelievable weapon, he had easily killed a powerful monster that was far stronger than him, and, at the same time, he had not paid any price. As the last monster fell to the ground, the water vapor that filled the air finally dissipated, and the game returned to its original state. However, the team members who had survived the disaster did not reveal any expressions of joy. They all stood with heavy expressions beside the heavily injured muscular man, raising their weapons several times to help him end his pain, but for some reason, they gave up in the end. After all, in their eyes, this kind of terrifying burn was almost a death sentence, and not many people could survive it, or even recover to their pre-injury state. Chapter 1035. Not a bad team. Standing on the upper floor of the tower, Zhang Cheng gave his evaluation with a smile after admiring the simple and quick battle process. There was no doubt that he was not at all surprised by the outcome of this battle. If they could not even deal with an enemy of this level, it could only mean that the members of this adventure team were all trash. There was no value in training or testing them. His attitude towards trash had always been very clear, and that was to use physical means to directly eliminate them. Trash and worthless fellows did not deserve to live. At the very least, they did not deserve to live in front of him. As for the 4 life forms created with the help of the power of the main string, they were at most a warm-up. They were still far from being able to figure out the strengths and weaknesses of their abilities. Fortunately, if there was one thing that Zhang Cheng had the most at the moment, it was definitely time. This was because, to a certain extent, his life was already tied to the entire universe. Unless the universe was destroyed, or those rulers who had the same level of power as him took action, he would never die, nor would he age or become weak. In the true sense of the word, his life had reached the state of eternity. Watching the sorrowful atmosphere in the adventure team become more and more intense, Zhang Cheng, who had always been indifferent, finally showed some kindness. He ordered the humanoid puppet created by alchemy to heal the injured, and then he went into the small black room to prepare for the next round of the game. Of course, this was not because he pitied the other party, but because he felt that it was a pity that this toy that could help him test his ability and provide a certain degree of entertainment and could relieve boredom and loneliness died just like that. It should be known that the most important reason why adventure teams were popular in many fantasy worlds was that they could cooperate with each other and exert unimaginable strength. However, if an important member of the originally well-equipped team suddenly died or left, then the combat strength of the entire team would immediately drop by several levels. The enemies that could have been easily dealt with would now all be finished in one move. Obviously, Zhang Cheng did not want this team to have a serious loss of members, at least not before they failed. Therefore, before the members of the team could react to what had happened, a maid quietly came to the muscular man's side and poured a bottle of powerful healing potion into his mouth. In an instant, the man who was on the verge of death suddenly sat up from his semi-conscious state. All the burns and scars on his body healed, formed scabs, and fell off in less than half a minute. What happened? I remember that I was injured. The muscular man shouted incoherently as he touched his body, trying to find a wound. "What did you give Oleg to drink?" The only woman in the group grabbed the maid and questioned sternly. "Relax, please don't worry. He drank the healing potion concocted by Master and is fine now." The maid was obviously not annoyed by the other party's rude behavior, and a faint smile still hung on her beautiful face. "Healing potion?" The young man's eyes lit up when he heard the term. "Who is your master? Why is he treating our injured comrades?" "There is no why. Our master's command is our code of conduct. In addition, the master is very satisfied with your performance just now and allows you to be rewarded after each game. You can keep it or use it to buy all kinds of magic potions and weapons to better prepare for the next battle." As she spoke, the maid opened a chest of 8,000 gold coins and placed it in front of the young man. Above the glittering gold coins, there was a list of items that could be exchanged. The young man didn't say anything and immediately picked up the list, carefully reading the words and descriptions on it. After a while, he raised his head and asked, "We can exchange for all the items on this list?" The maid nodded without hesitation. "That's right. As long as you have enough gold coins, you can buy whatever you want. If you can pass Master's final test, you can even take away all the items you won in the game and return to your world." My God, the flame-enchanted longsword only costs 1,200 gold coins. That's too cheap. And this dragon scale armor, it only costs 5,000 gold coins. Unbelievable. If the nobles knew, they would definitely go crazy. The middle-aged man glanced at the list and immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. One had to know that many of these items were treasures that money couldn't necessarily buy. Even dukes couldn't help but go bankrupt to buy one as a family heirloom. But now, adventurers like them who lived in the middle and lower classes of society actually had the opportunity to wear these treasures on their bodies. For a moment, he didn't know whether he was lucky or unlucky. "Damn it, we only have 8,000 gold coins. We have to be frugal." The young man suppressed the ecstasy in his heart and said with gritted teeth, because at the bottom of the list, he saw more than 80 magic scrolls and books that he had never seen before. For a low-level apprentice with no money and no power, this was simply an irresistible temptation. Now, he was no longer in a hurry to escape. Instead, he wanted to stay and complete the game with the master of the tower, no matter how dangerous the game process was. After all, the mysterious and profound magic knowledge of the master of this tower had already convinced him. At the same time, he believed that as long as he could persist to the end, he would definitely surpass his mentor and become a powerful spellcaster. "We have 6 people. After splitting it evenly, each of us will get 1,300 gold coins. But I suggest that it's best to reduce it to 1,200 gold coins and use the remaining money to buy healing potions. I believe that you have just seen how magical the emerald green liquid is." It was unknown when the short figure had left the dark place, but he spoke his suggestion in a slightly low voice. "Agreed. A very fair way of splitting it. I have no objections. Same here. Let's do it this way." After confirming the rules of distribution, the group quickly began to choose weapons and armor according to their own needs and the needs of the team. As for gloves, boots, rings, amulets, and other high-level magic accessories, they couldn't afford them with their pitiful amount of money, so they could only choose to give up. But the young man with the spellcasting ability didn't buy any weapons or armor. Instead, he chose to buy a spellbook and 2 magic scrolls. When he received the items, his whole person was in a state of extreme excitement. His 2 eyes shot out scorching flames, almost raising the temperature of the surrounding air by a few degrees. Chapter 1036. Battle. Repair. Buy all kinds of powerful magical items that had never been seen or heard of before. After the planet had completed its rotation for a total of 30 times, the members of the adventurer party had finally gotten used to the thrilling and intense battles that happened every 12 hours. There were even a few times where they were almost wiped out. However, they did not know whether it was because they were too lucky or because they were too outstanding, but in the end, they managed to survive without any mishaps. Especially after they learned that no matter how serious the injuries were, even if they lost an arm or a leg, they could quickly regrow it with the help of magical potions. After discovering this, in order to increase their efficiency, they often adopted some fighting methods that would trade injuries for lives to ensure that the party would not be reduced to a state of losing members. Of course, as the person who gained the most and whose strength improved the fastest in the entire party, the young man who possessed the spellcasting ability had now mastered more than 25 new spells of different levels and attributes. In addition, he also held a staff inlaid with silver-white crystals in his hand. It was simply incomparable to the past. He believed that if he were to return now, he would definitely be able to easily defeat his former superior teacher and even become the strongest spellcaster in the academy. However, it was a pity that he still could not leave this place that was completely sealed off. He also did not have the chance to show off his increasingly powerful magical power to anyone. Not only him, but the other members of the party were also in the same predicament. Although they were all equipped with magical weapons and equipment that many people dreamed of, they couldn't show it to anyone. They couldn't drink and brag about their adventures to the people around them to gain a sense of psychological satisfaction. Loneliness, boredom, exhaustion, along with the physical adaptation, came the mental disturbances. Intelligent beings were not machines. They had complex emotions and desires. If they were not satisfied for a long time, they would sooner or later become mentally ill or psychopathic. So when he sensed that these people were about to reach their limits, Zhang Cheng finally appeared in front of them after the last game. He smiled and announced, "Thank you for your cooperation over the past few days. Now, I declare that you are free. You can take all the things that you can take and leave this place forever and return to the world that you live in." What? We are free. The muscular man wiped the dark red blood stains on his face. His eyes revealed a trace of confusion. That's right. He was at a loss. As a typical simple-minded warrior, he had unknowingly accepted his current situation. He did not even feel that there was anything wrong with being imprisoned here forever. He was prepared to live like this for the rest of his life until the day he fell in front of a powerful enemy. In contrast, the others were much more excited, especially the middle-aged man who was extremely eager to leave with his wealth. He couldn't wait to ask, "Really? Are you really going to let us go?" "Of course. To be exact, you can take whatever you want and leave through that passage." Zhangqing nodded with a faint smile. Of course, this was obviously not because he was being kind. After 30 days of testing, these adventurers had reached their limits. If he continued to increase the difficulty, then it would not be a game where there were winners and losers, but a complete massacre. Next, he needed some higher quality testers, so he had to use these people to spread the news. What could make a group of powerful people willingly come to the depths of a primeval forest? It was nothing more than fame, wealth, power, and rare magic items. He believed that as long as the country bumpkins on this planet saw a group of adventurers wearing dragon-scale armor and holding high-grade, enchanted weapons with their own eyes, they would naturally come to this place with greed and desire, and willingly become a participant of the game. "Thank you for your kindness and generosity." The middle-aged man obviously did not want to stay for even a second. He immediately picked up a bag of gold, silver, and jewelry piled in the corner, and ran through the dark passage to the forest outside the tower without looking back. He took in big breaths of fresh air, his face full of joy and excitement. In contrast, the only woman in the team was much calmer. She looked at Zhang Cheng with a slightly surprised gaze. After a full minute, she opened her mouth and asked, "You are the owner of this tower? What's wrong? Do you have any questions?" Zhang Cheng asked in a pleasant manner. "No, I just find it unbelievable. Normally, powerful spellcasters should be old people, right?" The woman carefully probed. "Old people? This depends on how you understand age and lifespan. For some short-lived races, 100 years is an almost insurmountable obstacle. At around 60 years old, it is inevitable that they will start to age. But for long-lived races, 100 years is just a small part of their life. Some races even just become adults at 100 years old. So please don't treat me as your kind. Although I look very similar to you, in fact, we are not the same race." Zhang Cheng explained meaningfully. The woman nodded thoughtfully. "I understand. Thank you for keeping your promise. I promise that after leaving, I will not tell anyone about what happened here. No, no, no. There is no need to keep it a secret. On the contrary, I encourage you to tell as many people as possible. Zhang Cheng took the initiative to correct her mistake. What do you mean? You want to attract more people here? The woman raised her eyebrows in surprise. Yes. Do you know? I'm a person who likes to play games. I very much welcome more people to come and be my guest. Zhang Qing opened his arms slightly and put on a harmless look. However, the woman obviously did not believe his words. But for some reason, she did not ask any more questions. Instead, she picked up a bag of gold, silver, and jewels, turned and walked through the passage, disappearing into the forest outside the tower. After his teammates left one by one, the young man took a deep breath and gathered his courage to say, "Respected Tower Master, my name is Islands. As you can see, I am a magic apprentice. I hope to stay, whether as a servant or as an apprentice." Stay? Yes. During this period of time, I become more and more aware of your excellence and greatness in the field of magic, and I'm willing to follow you and become your servant and apprentice. The young man who called himself Alan bowed deeply. At this moment, his thirst for knowledge and power overcame the fear in his heart. He was willing to bet his life for a better future. Chapter 1037. Zhang Cheng looked at the young man's face, which was filled with excitement, and desire. He felt like he had met his old self, the young man who was willing to pay any price for knowledge and power. After about a minute, he couldn't help but smile and say, "Give me a reason to accept you." Reason? Islands was slightly stunned, as if he didn't understand the meaning of this sentence. Yes, reason. Why should I accept you? Or rather, what talent do you have that is worth my time and effort to nurture? Zhang Qing narrowed his eyes and looked at the young man with a scrutinizing gaze. Without a doubt, this gave a young man a lot of psychological pressure. However, he obviously didn't want to give up. He quickly organized his words and quickly replied, "Respected Tower Master, although I don't dare to boast that I'm a genius, I'm far more talented than most of the apprentices. Moreover, I can provide you with a lot of information about the civilized world, as well as detailed maps of the various countries, cities, and religions. Believe me, if they really spread the news here, it won't be long before the peace here is broken. Who knows? There might even be people leading a powerful army here, trying to conquer and plunder your treasures." Oh, conquer and plunder. That sounds interesting. Zhang Cheng immediately pursed his lips and revealed a playful smile. What kind of cosmic joke was this? Would he be afraid of a group of low-level civilizations that were still bound to the surface of the planet by gravity and a simple army that mainly used cold weapons? Even if all the creatures on this planet joined forces, they wouldn't be able to hurt him at all. On the contrary, if there were really idiots who thought that they could get something from him through numbers, then it wouldn't take long for them to discover what was called the true advantage of numbers. Moreover, the large number of enemies was just right for him to test his proficiency in using the various laws. So, you accept my reason? Islands' eyes flashed with the light of expectation. Zhang Cheng nodded with a faint smile. That's right. I accept. From now on, you are the only apprentice here. You can freely enter the library, alchemy lab, and spell testing room on the second floor as you wish. However, please remember that learning magic, especially powerful magic, is always a dangerous thing. You need to do it step by step and restrain your subconscious greed and desire. If you can't do it, then there's no need to talk about the consequences. Sooner or later, you'll become a lifeless corpse. Sometimes, you might not even be able to preserve a complete corpse. Don't worry. I swear I won't disappoint you. The young man once again bowed deeply, his tone revealing undisguised excitement and agitation. Yes, he had succeeded. He had finally grasped the opportunity to absorb knowledge and power. Now, a huge treasure had finally opened its doors to him. On weekdays, you can read books to increase your knowledge. I will spend an hour every week to answer your questions. Work hard. If your progress doesn't satisfy me, you may be kicked out at any time. After saying this, Zhang Qing directly cast a teleportation spell and disappeared. Islands was so excited that he couldn't control himself as he felt the powerful magical energy flash past him. He clenched his fists tightly and muttered to himself, "I did it! I did it! Father, did you see that? The son of a merchant could also become a powerful spellcaster. When I return from my studies, I'll definitely make you proud of me." However, although he was excited, he quickly calmed himself down and walked out of the tower to bid farewell to his companions who were waiting in the forest. He also asked them to bring back his spoils of war to ease the financial strain of his family. After all, it was not easy to train a spellcaster. The school fees alone were expensive enough to make the commoners despair. Even the relatively wealthy merchants had to spend a lot of money. Just like that, after the group bid farewell to the young man, they traveled for more than half a month before returning to the border of the civilized world, a small city with a population of 35,000. As they did not have time to take off the expensive magical weapons and armor on their bodies, they caused a commotion as soon as they passed through the city gate. Many merchants, nobles, and guilds came to find out what happened to this adventurer team that could bring back such a huge amount of wealth. At the same time, there were more than 10 pieces of powerful magical equipment that were priceless. This was especially true for the 2 pieces of dragon scale armor. After being appraised by the master of armor, they were both made of the hardest back scales of adult dragons. Its defensive ability was far superior to the expensive full-body armor. Needless to say, the magical weapons had extremely eye-catching appearance. Just the light and shadow effects of the blazing flames, the bone-piercing cold air, and the flickering silver-white electric arcs were enough to make many people stunned. After about 4 hours, when the sky gradually darkened, the lord of the city finally gathered all the powerful people in the territory, intending to discuss how to deal with this matter. He first glanced at the expressions on everyone's faces, then took a deep breath and said, "Everyone, I believe you've already heard. About half a month's journey in the depths of the forest, a gorgeous magical tower suddenly appeared. There are countless amazing treasures in it, and it's said that the tower master has extraordinary strength. Not only can he create all kinds of magical puppets, but he can also create all kinds of creatures. Most importantly, he actually welcomes everyone to play a game, an orderly game where life is used as the wager. The winner will be rewarded handsomely, and the loser will lose their lives." Just deliberately mystifying things. I think we should form an allied army and directly attack that tower. A rough man with a full beard slammed the table, his eyes revealing undisguised greed. Ever since he saw the amazing defensive ability of the dragon scale armor with his own eyes, he swore that he must get his hands on one. No warrior would be able to reject such a defensive equipment, and, similarly, they would not be able to reject powerful magical weapons. As long as he could borrow the help of a large number of soldiers to attack the tower, then he would be able to freely pick the treasures inside. It had to be said that when almost all intelligent creatures discovered something they desired, the first thing that would come to their minds would definitely not be a trade. Instead, they would snatch, plunder, and obtain everything they wanted through violent means. However, an old man wearing a long robe immediately sneered and said sarcastically, "Using an army to attack a magical tower? Are you crazy? Not to mention the magical alchemy and life modification technology displayed by the other party. Just the energy stored in the tower itself is enough to easily release earth-shattering large-scale damage spells. Even if all the soldiers in the city were to go all out, they would be wiped out in just a few minutes. The only thing that can deal with magic is magic. My lord, I think the Spellcaster Guild should send a representative to contact the other party. Any rash action will bring a terrible disaster to this city." Chapter 1038. The only thing that can deal with magic is magic? Huh. The bearded man couldn't help but laugh coldly. "Don't flatter yourself too much, Master Melrot. From what I know, there are many spellcasters who die under daggers and swords every year. As long as you give me enough catapults, I'm confident that I can take down the magic tower in 3 days." "Idiot! Do you think that a magic tower built with cheap materials in a small city like ours can compare to those advanced magic towers with complete facilities? No. Look at the huge magic towers in the capitals of the various countries. Even if the cities and palaces are taken down, you will never be able to take a step closer. The power of magic is 1,000 times, no, 10,000 times stronger than you think. The old man called Master Melrot retorted with a gloomy expression. As the highest leader of the spellcasters in this city, he knew all too well how powerful a real magic tower was. If the other party was as the adventurers described, then even an army of tens of thousands would not be able to get close. More importantly, if they accidentally angered the other party and caused endless revenge, this city would soon be reduced to ruins. It might even implicate the entire country. However, it was a pity that the bearded man didn't seem to understand this painstaking effort. He still insisted, "My lord, think about it. A magic tower filled with all sorts of rare treasures is right next to your territory. As long as you can take it down, not only will you obtain unimaginable wealth, you will also obtain countless magical knowledge and techniques. With these, it won't be long before you and your family can change their fate and even enter the palace to discuss important matters with the king and dukes." There was no need to ask to know that his words had moved the lord. He took the initiative to turn around and ask the old man, "Master Melrot, do you really think that taking over that magic tower is beyond our capabilities?" "That's right. I promise, my lord. If you listen to this knight whose mind is filled with thoughts of slaughter and plunder, you will definitely regret your decision. Remember, magic is not a sword, nor is it right. It is not something that ordinary people can control. Only the most intelligent geniuses are able to pry into the secrets behind magic." Melrot explained in a serious tone. "How about we send an emissary to investigate? As far as I know, there seems to be a magic apprentice called Islands left behind in the tower. Perhaps we can send someone to obtain some necessary information from him." The lord was very cautious as he spoke of his thoughts. After all, even a fool would know that one must first have a general understanding of one's enemy before starting a war. Otherwise, rashly declaring war on an unknown enemy would be no different from courting death. Soften when facing the strong, bully when facing the weak. This was the way most countries and forces did things, and there were almost no exceptions. Melrot was undoubtedly aware of the lord's intentions. He sighed helplessly. "All right, I'll send someone to investigate. But don't get your hopes up. Since Islands is willing to stay, he must have joined the master of the magic tower and even signed a binding magic contract. You need not worry about that. Other than that apprentice, I will also send 2 elite teams to participate in the killing game. They will also take on the task of gathering information." After saying that, the lord gave a look to his knights. The latter understood and immediately turned and disappeared into the dark tunnel. About half an hour later, a team of 30 fully armed men slowly left the city gates and advanced towards the tower in the depths of the forest. Watching the team gradually disappear into the distance, a woman hiding in the crowd suddenly asked her companions, "What do you think the chances of these fellows coming back alive are?" "0. They won't be coming back." The short man who had been hiding in the shadows all this time gave a chilling answer. "You're right. The reason why we were able to come back alive was because the master of the tower wanted to spread the news to attract more people to their deaths. Now that he has achieved his goal, there is no need to keep these fellows with bad intentions. I think that not only will these fellows be unlucky, but our Lord will also not be able to escape this calamity." The middle-aged man explained meaningfully. Obviously, they were the members of the adventurer team that Zhang Cheng let go. Now, they had become famous people in the city. Almost every day, they would participate in various kinds of banquets and spread the news that they knew. Of course, other than the muscular man who only knew how to eat and drink and develop a relationship beyond friendship with those hungry and resentful women, the rest of the people in the team knew that they would soon be leaving the city. As for the reason, it was quite simple. With the departure of the first team to search for the tower, it would not be long before bad news came back. At that time, All the nobles who suffered heavy losses would see them as a thorn in their side. They might even put aside their pride and directly rob them of the magical equipment and weapons that they risked their lives to exchange for through battle rewards. At the same time, in the tower deep in the forest, Islands was completely unaware of the huge trouble that had befallen him. He stayed in the library, reading the books on the shelves that recorded countless magical knowledge and alchemy skills. Almost every book could bring him great surprise and inspiration. Although he had never had the chance to enter the library of a magic tower in a big city, he was sure that even the best magic tower on the road could not have more books than here, and the knowledge recorded was broader and more profound. In order to grasp more knowledge in the shortest time possible, he did not hesitate to abandon his health and sleep. He spent almost 24 hours in the library. When he was hungry, he would ask the maid to bring him some simple food. When he was thirsty, he would drink a mouthful of cold spring water. When he was sleepy, he would lie on the floor and sleep. No bathing, no washing his face, no washing his hair, no brushing his teeth. Although his whole body was so dirty that it could almost kill a person, Islands' heart was filled with excitement and joy. He could feel that as he grasped more and more knowledge, his spellcasting ability was also improving geometrically. Just as he was completely immersed in the sea of knowledge and could not extricate himself, he was completely unaware that Zhang Cheng had quietly set up thousands of various monsters in the forest outside. There were so many of them that all the animals in the surrounding area were chased away. Especially when the sky darkened, those pairs of eyes that emitted a strange light could definitely scare people to death. Chapter 1039. Haha, look at these little cuties. I really hope the natives of this planet can be a little stupid. Otherwise, I won't be able to complete such a large-scale test by myself. Zhang Cheng stood alone in the dense forest outside the tower, one of his hands gently stroking a monster covered in thick gray fur. These little monsters with strange appearances and different abilities were all special life forms that he had created through equal distribution. Their greatest use was to observe the main string he had devoured through large amounts of actual combat data, to see which aspect of rule power was advantageous and which was disadvantageous in the main string he had devoured. It had to be said that this was a rather large amount of experimentation, especially under the premise of not alarming the outside world as much as possible. He could not expand the experiment to more planets and rely on numbers to quickly obtain the corresponding data. Similarly, he could not use crazy destruction, slaughter, and destruction to test the limits of his limits. This was because he would inevitably be noticed by other rulers, who would then monitor him or even launch a surprise attack. Of course, there were still too few of these monsters at the moment, far from enough to take the initiative to launch an all-out attack on the natives. Thus, controlling the scale of the conflict was the most ideal situation. Assimilating the laws, understanding the laws, controlling the laws. This was the secret that allowed the rulers to stand above all other life forms in the universe. From a certain perspective, the rulers were the representatives chosen by the empty will of the universe. Their every action would determine the ultimate direction of the universe. Up until now, Zhang Cheng had only been able to assimilate and understand the laws. He had not truly grasped those complicated and ever-changing laws. At best, he could only be considered an applicator and was still far from being able to control them. Thus, he did not wish to be stared at by countless malicious eyes when he was at his weakest. Thinking of this, he could not help but raise the corners of his mouth slightly, muttering to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "I sacrificed so many things, not even hesitating to place my soul in eternal darkness, in exchange for today's unparalleled power. No one can stop me from completing the ultimate transcendence, and no one can use me as a chess piece. Just watch those self-righteous rulers. I will use your corpses to prove that I am the only one in the universe, the ultimate evolution of life." Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, over 10 days had passed. When the small team sent out by the Overlord saw the magnificent tower standing in the huge crater, everyone could not help but cheer. There were even some whose eyes flickered with greed and desire. That was right. It was greed and desire. They hadn't realized what kind of danger they were about to face, and still simply thought that this was a fruitful journey that was destined to be a fruitful one. Wealth, treasure, magical knowledge, the things that most people desperately wanted to obtain were all inside the 100-meter-tall arrow tower in front of them. Without any hesitation, the old man in charge of leading the team was the first to rush through the entrance and into the empty hall. The traces of the previous battle had long been cleaned up by the alchemy maids, and even the destroyed, activated metal armor had been restored to its original state. It looked no different from before. Looking at the exquisite furniture around them, the expensive carpet under their feet, and the gold and silver decorations on the walls and ceiling, all the members who had rushed in were stunned. Their mouths were agape, as if they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Even the knights of noble birth could not help but gasp at the sight of the extravagant decorations on both sides of the palace. Even the royal palace would pale in comparison. Before these people could recover from their shock, Zhang Cheng's familiar voice once again echoed in the air. "Welcome. We welcome you all. As the host, I sincerely thank you for coming to participate in my game. I believe that you must have heard of the rules, so I don't want to say any more nonsense. Now, let's start the initial test and eliminate those who don't meet the requirements. Only the qualified will be allowed to stay." As soon as he finished speaking, everyone present heard a creaking sound. The next second, boom, accompanied by a loud noise. A total of 50 monsters that were completely supported by the rules of death slowly walked in from the entrance. Unlike ordinary undead life, the source of their power was not provided by the black hole formed by negative energy in the material plane, but directly by the rules of death that were everywhere in the universe. If they couldn't deal the maximum damage in one go, no matter how many times they were attacked, they would quickly recover as before. Formation. The knight in charge of leading the team felt a bone-piercing chill and immediately shouted out an order. After all, the people he brought were not a motley crew like an adventurer team. On the contrary, except for the 3 spellcasters, the rest of the 30 people were all elites in the army. Compared to fighting in small teams, they were undoubtedly more inclined to build a defensive formation that was like an iron wall, bit by bit like a meat grinder, relying on intimate cooperation to grind the enemy to death. The advantage of doing this was that they could use the least casualties in exchange for the greatest victory. After the order was given, in less than half a minute, more than 20 people formed a concave, semi-arc defensive line. The people in front held a sword in one hand and raised a shield in the other, while the people behind held their pole-handle weapons flat. There were also a few who held heavy crossbows and began to shoot sharp arrows continuously. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The triangular arrowheads pierced through the air and made sounds. Every time it sounded, a monster would be pierced by a huge force, either falling to the ground on the spot or involuntarily taking a few steps back. Unfortunately, the knight in charge soon realized that the heavy crossbow's attack could not kill the slow-moving monsters not far in front of him. No matter how fatal the damage was, as long as the monsters lay on the ground for more than 10 seconds, they would get up and continue to attack. Damn it! Magic! My subordinates need magic assistance. The knight turned around and shouted at the 3 spellcasters. The latter hesitated for a moment. The 3 of them exchanged glances and then began to chant spells in unison. Although their mission was to contact the owner of this tower, it would be best if they could reach a series of agreements through negotiation. However, the problem was that if they did not act in this situation, the team would definitely be annihilated. They might not even have the time to say a word before they were torn to pieces by the ferocious monsters. After weighing the pros and cons, the 3 of them decided to end the battle first and talk about the rest after they had recovered. Very quickly, after the spell was completed, dozens of blinding arrows of light shot towards the monsters. Almost every time they hit, they dealt considerable damage. In addition, with the help of the elite soldiers, the ferocious monsters quickly lost their limbs one after another. This way, even if they did not die, they would not be much of a threat. Chapter 1040. They're smart, aren't they? Standing on the top floor of the tower, Zhang Cheng watched the battle on the ground floor through the magic mirror while asking Islands who was standing at the door. The young man hesitated for a moment before replying, "Yes, master. If I'm not mistaken, they should be soldiers from the nearest city. The leader is a noble knight, and those spellcasters should be the higher-ups of the Spellcaster Guild." "Oh, so your companions have successfully returned to the civilized world and spread the news?" Zhang Cheng stroked his chin with interest, his eyes flashing with a chilling light. "That's right. If I'm not mistaken, these people should be here for all kinds of powerful magical items and huge wealth." Alan's carefully reminded. As a servant who had lived in this tower for more than a month, he knew better than anyone how terrifying this mysterious tower master was. Among the many legendary spells recorded in the library, there were at least thousands of spells that could easily destroy a city or even a country, turning hundreds of thousands of square kilometers of land into ashes. Although he was far from reaching the minimum requirement to learn these powerful spells, he understood that since the library had records of these spells, it was impossible for the Tower Master not to know. This also meant that once the foolish and greedy nobles from his hometown angered the Tower Master, the entire city could be razed to the ground. But interestingly, Zhangqing obviously did not care about this little greed. He smiled indifferently. "It's okay. As long as they can pass the game, I don't mind giving them everything they want. But you have to remember, the prerequisite is to survive." As soon as he finished speaking, those monsters that were knocked down to the ground by magic and dismembered by swords suddenly opened their mouths and spat out clouds of thick black smoke. They surged towards the unlucky ones closest to them at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the blink of an eye, large amounts of black smoke surged into the bodies of the warriors one after another. In less than 1 or 2 minutes, their eyeballs turned completely black. At the same time, they emitted a terrifying aura of death. They turned around and pounced on others, opening their mouths and biting their opponents' throats and faces. Even if their bodies were pierced by sharp blades, they did not flinch at all. "Damn it, what the F***CK is this thing?" The leading knight widened his eyes, revealing undisguised panic and fear. Perhaps he was not afraid of powerful monsters, but he was completely at a loss when it came to this mysterious power that was far beyond his understanding. "Hang in there. This should be some kind of undead creature. Buy us some time to cast spells." The oldest spell caster hurriedly yelled at the top of his lungs. Compared to the warriors who had very weak energy perception, they could feel the extremely dense death energy. They understood that once the black smoke surged into their bodies, it would not be as simple as death. Even their souls would be devoured and become a part of death. Death, the purest form of death. It was clear that when Zhang Cheng created these creatures, he had added part of his understanding of the laws, making them very difficult to truly kill. It didn't take long for nearly half of the team to become pitiful sacrificial lambs, forever disappearing from this world. Seeing this scene, Island subconsciously shivered, his eyes revealing deep reverence and fear. Because at this moment, he finally understood how lucky his team was. They had never encountered such a difficult opponent, or they would not have been able to leave alive. Just as the number of these elite soldiers was decreasing, and they were about to be completely wiped out, the leading knight finally broke down. He could not help but shout loudly, "Stop! Quickly stop! We surrender!" "Surrender? Sorry, there's no such option." Zhang Cheng mercilessly rejected the other party's surrender. "No, I'm a messenger sent by the Lord. You can't kill me. Otherwise, he won't let you go." The knight tried to use threats and intimidation to save his life. "Then let him come. I welcome more people to join this game." "No, you lunatic, demon. Ah!" Accompanied by ear-piercing screams, the knight was finally devoured by the death energy and became one of the walking corpses. As for the 3 spellcasters, they were now completely surrounded. They did not even dare to move, fearing that they would accidentally attract a fatal disaster. They obediently stayed where they were, praying that the master of the tower would spare their lives on account of the fact that they were all spellcasters. Looking at the walking corpses whose bodies were occupied by the death energy constantly moving forward, Islands could no longer hold back and immediately said, "Master, the remaining 3 are members of the Spellcaster Guild. I suggest that you don't kill them, but ask them first." This was because the leading old man was the mentor who had led him into the magic palace in the past. No matter what, he had to stand up and try to plead for leniency. Spellcaster Guild? A strange expression appeared on Zhang Cheng's face. Yes, the Spellcaster Guild. It's a neutral organization on the continent. It's usually managed by the strongest and most famous local spellcasters. It rarely intervenes in political and military affairs. They might just want to meet you or discuss whether they can exchange some magic knowledge and materials. The young man quickly explained, "All right, then I'll leave this matter to you. Don't let me down. Otherwise, you should know how serious the consequences are." After saying this meaningful sentence, Zhang Cheng directly waved his hand and drove the young man out of the upper level of the tower. Islands only felt his vision blur, and in the next second, he appeared at the bottom level out of thin air. The old man immediately noticed him and immediately stood up excitedly and shouted, "Islands, save us!" "Of course, dear mentor." The young man calmed down a little and then ordered the surrounding monsters, "All of you, back down. Your mission is over." Roar! Whether it was the walking corpses or the monsters, they all let out a low and hoarse roar and quickly turned around and disappeared at the end of the passage. Watching these terrifying fellows gradually disappear into the distance, the old man finally breathed a sigh of relief. Using his wide sleeves to wipe the sweat on his forehead and cheeks, he sighed with a bitter smile. "I really didn't expect that there would be a day when I would be saved by you. Can you tell me about this tower and what exactly happened to you? I can feel that your magic power has far surpassed mine and is not inferior to the president." "Of course, mentor. But before that, you still have to come with me to the kitchen. We'll talk while we eat." Chapter 1041. Although Islands was only a lowly servant, he still had the right to command the maids, magic puppets, and living armors. Therefore, under his instructions, the kitchen quickly prepared a sumptuous meal. After a while, dozens of delicacies emitting tempting aroma were served on the table. Looking at the dishes that they had never seen before, as well as the artificial life and magic puppets standing behind them, the 3 members from the Spellcaster Guild widened their eyes, as if they could not believe what they saw with their own eyes. Especially the latter, they did not even dare to dream that all the daily work in a magic tower was done by artificial life and magic puppets. Among them, the intelligence of the artificial life was not inferior to that of normal humans. Not only could it execute extremely complicated orders, but it also had a certain degree of subjective judgment. Coupled with its exquisite appearance and figure, it was simply the helper of every spellcaster's dream. Shock, admiration, envy, worship. Under the stimulation of a series of complex emotions, a middle-aged spellcaster with a mustache clenched his fists tightly and gritted his teeth as he muttered to himself, "Heaven. This is simply a heaven that spellcasters dream of. You're right. This is heaven for us. Tell me, Islands, how can we stay?" Another spellcaster could not help but ask. Hearing these words, the young man immediately shook his head with a bitter smile. "I'm sorry, I'm not sure. In fact, I don't even know why the Tower Master took me in." "Damn it. Then why didn't he take us to see the Tower Master?" The middle-aged man with a mustache suddenly stood up, his tone revealing a strong desire. Needless to say, he felt that since Zhang Cheng was willing to take in an apprentice with ordinary talent, he would naturally not reject him. "Take you to see the Tower Master?" Islands' eyes revealed a look of looking at idiots. "Do you think I have such a right?" "No, I'm just a lowly servant. I don't even have the authority to leave the tower. Do you understand? Besides, if the Tower Master wants to see you, he will appear in front of you directly and not wait for a servant to introduce you." "Damn it. I can't accept this." "I can't accept this either." "Shut up. Look at your ugly appearances now. Do you still deserve to be called arrogant spellcasters?" The old man could not stand it anymore and took the initiative to speak up. However, he quickly turned his attention to his former apprentice and lowered his voice to probe. "Islands, tell me, What kind of person is the Tower Master? Why did he build such an amazing magic tower in the depths of the forest? And what's with those terrifying monsters? I'm sorry, sir, I don't know anything. Up until now, I've only seen Pagoda Master less than 10 times. The young man pretended to be in a difficult position. He wasn't a fool. He understood that the other party wanted to use this opportunity to probe the Tower Master's background before deciding what to do next. Since the Tower Master of the Tower, the Master of the Tower, the Tower of the Tower, the Tower of the Tower of the Master of Master. After all, it was the instinct of most intelligent creatures to worship and follow the strong, be it good or evil, order or chaos. Looking at the history of Earth, looking at those barbaric grassland tribes from the north, each and every one of them was an executioner whose hands were stained with blood. They would plunder wealth and slaughter civilians at the drop of a hat. But what could they do? It was all thanks to a large group of so-called historians that even a scumbag like Temujin was crowned with the title of Heaven's Chosen One. The laughable moral system that humans had built up would selectively turn a blind eye at times like this, and even categorize it as the primitive and backward civilization of the past. You don't know. The old man frowned, obviously not satisfied with this answer. Islands nodded without hesitation. I really don't know anything. The only thing I know is that the Tower Master is an extremely powerful spellcaster, and at the same time, extremely wealthy. He never cared about materials that are extremely precious to us. Also, the books in this library are an eye-opener. I probably won't be able to learn even 1% of them in my lifetime. Then, can you take me to the library? The old man's eyes lit up. No, I can't. Normal visitors and game participants can only stay on the first floor at most. If they enter the second floor, they will immediately be attacked by the magic puppets. Trust me, with the magical power you have, you won't even be able to break through their defenses. Allens gave a meaningful warning. He knew all too well what the spellcasters of these guilds would do for precious magical knowledge. Islands, as a representative of the modern guild, formally request that you find a way to let the Tower Master meet with us no matter what. If you can't, go to the library will do. You have to understand that those greedy nobles have their eyes on this place. I must bring back enough evidence to prove to them that attacking this place was a mistake. Understood. I will explain to the Tower Master later. But don't get your hopes up. He is not someone who can be easily persuaded. That's fine. All you have to do is pass on the message. With the end of the conversation, the young man quickly left the kitchen and returned to the upper floor of the tower. By now, Zhang Cheng had finished dealing with the injured monster and was admiring the newly modified knight's corpse with great interest. Without turning his head, he asked, "How was it? Did those guys say anything interesting?" "Yes, master. They said they came here on behalf of the Spellcaster Guild and wanted to have a face-to-face talk with you." Allens placed one hand on his chest and bowed deeply as he replied, "Oomph, self-righteous idiots. Tell them that if they want to meet with me, they have to go through my game first. Otherwise, there's no need to talk. I never talk to trash. Not in the past, not now, and not in the future." Zhang Cheng pursed his lips and revealed a contemptuous smile. "Understood. I will pass on your words to them word for word. Apart from that, I also found out that some greedy fellows have their eyes on this place. Perhaps it won't be long before some fools who overestimate themselves come to their deaths." "Ha! Very good. This is one of the few good news I've heard recently. Go on. I'll prepare more surprises for these fools in the next few days." "As you wish." After watching Islands walk through the corridor and disappear at the corner of the stairs leading to the lower floor, Zhang Cheng gently stroked the armrest of the chair. His eyes were shining like stars, as if they were about to merge with the stars in the sky. Chapter 1042. Waiting was always a torturous thing, especially when the person they desperately wanted to meet ignored them. The pain and resentment was enough to torture the three messengers from the Spellcaster Guild to the brink of insanity. If they had not witnessed the indifference and powerful strength of the Tower Master with their own eyes, perhaps some bold fellows would have tried to break into the second floor and read the precious knowledge in the legendary library that would drive people crazy. Unfortunately, His desire to live had overtaken his desire for knowledge and power. In the end, these fellows who had accumulated a bellyful of resentment obediently stayed on the first floor and did not even dare to touch the stairs to the second floor. Although there were no horrifying monsters or powerful magic puppet guards on the spiral stairs, the fear of death still shrouded everyone's head and did not dissipate at all. Just when their patience was about to run out, Island suddenly appeared and announced in an emotionless tone, "Follow me. The Tower Master has agreed to meet you." What? What? The middle-aged man with a handlebar mustache stood up abruptly, his face full of disbelief. They had been left here for about half a month and had been ignored. Every day, apart from eating, drinking, and going to the toilet, they would stay in the enclosed environment and practice spells. The only entertainment they had was to tease the artificial maids who had extremely high intelligence and subjective initiative during meals. It could be said that if this life continued, some of them would soon go crazy. "The Tower Master has agreed to meet you. Come on, don't let him wait too long." After saying that, Islands did not care if the other party had heard him clearly. He turned around and walked up the stairs directly. As the leader, the old man naturally would not let go of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Without saying a word, he followed closely behind. Even though climbing the stairs rapidly drained his originally poor physical strength, and he was constantly gasping for air, he did not have the slightest intention of stopping. After about 5 to 6 minutes, the group finally arrived at the room on the top floor of the tower. As the owner, Zhang Cheng, was standing on the balcony at this moment, looking down at the forest that had been transformed beyond recognition. Without turning his head, he asked, "You're the messengers who claim to be the Spellcaster Guild?" "Yes, Master. My name is Isolt Linny, and I'm the representative entrusted by the Guildmaster." The old man did not dare to show his usual arrogance and hurriedly bowed deeply with one hand on his chest. After all, in the circle of spellcasters, appearance and age had never been the yardstick to measure a person's strength. There was only one real yardstick to measure one's strength, and that was the purest magical power. "So, what do you want to say to me?" Zhang Cheng's right index finger gently tapped on the railing and turned around to look into the old man's eyes with a faint smile. The old man, who called himself Isolt Linny, hesitated for a moment before quickly taking out a yellowed scroll from his pocket. With a wry smile, he replied, "I can't describe it with words. You'd better read it yourself." "Hee, it seems that your conditions aren't very good, are they?" Zhang Cheng took the letter and glanced at it. The corners of his mouth rose slightly, revealing a mocking smile. Not to mention the other clauses, just the exchange of magical knowledge between them was enough to show that they were trying to take advantage of him without any scruples. What was the magical knowledge in his library? It was the precious result of learning, communicating, and concluding from countless worlds. Any apprentice with magical talent could be trained into a powerful spellcaster in a short period of time. But what about the other party? They were just a magic association in a small city on this planet. How could they have any valuable knowledge? In addition, the idea of using money and materials to exchange for various precious materials was also whimsical. Naked greed was revealed between the lines. Without a doubt, Isolde knew very well how ridiculous the guild's mistake was. He sighed helplessly and explained, "I understand. You must be very angry right now, thinking that you've been provoked for no reason. I'm very sorry about that. But please don't be angry. Before we came to this place, we had no idea how powerful you were." "Angry? Ha ha. No, I just think it's funny." Zhang Cheng laughed and shook his head. "You know what? Your actions remind me of a dog barking at a dragon. It's so ironic. Forget it. I don't want to waste my breath on frogs at the bottom of a well. Islands, take them to the library. I'll kindly allow these 3 to stay for 10 hours. After 10 hours, kick them out. As you wish, Master." The young man bowed slightly and winked at his former mentor. Then, he took the lead and walked toward the passage leading to the library. Although the other two tried to argue, they were stopped by Isolt. They obediently followed the young man and disappeared at the end of the corridor. When they were far away, The middle-aged man with the handlebar mustache could not help but question, "Why didn't you let us speak just now? Maybe we could persuade the Tower Master to change his mind and come to a few agreements." "Don't be silly, my friend. Have you seen a dragon negotiating with a wild dog? Stop daydreaming. The dragon may allow the wild dog to check the leftovers, but it will never put the wild dog on the same level as itself. To the powerful Tower Master, we in the Spellcaster Guild are just pathetic and ridiculous wild dogs. Do you understand?" The old man bluntly described the miserable situation they were in. Ever since he personally felt Zhang Cheng's energy that was as turbulent as the sea, he realized how wrong the guild master and the nobles in the city were. They were not facing a wealthy situation at all. Instead, they were facing a dragon's den where a ferocious and terrifying dragon lived. That's right, a bunch of idiots who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. They were actually eyeing the wealth that belonged to the dragon. This was no different from suicide. Right now, Isol only wanted to go to the library to see how much precious magical knowledge was on the shelves, and then bring back the cruel truth. As for whether the other party was willing to believe it or not, that was none of his business. Anyway, as long as the Lord and the Spellcaster Guild dared to send out an army, he would choose to leave without a second thought. The other two in the group had similar thoughts. The only difference was that they desperately wanted to obtain something from the library that could make them stronger. Selfishness had always been a common problem for spellcasters. To be precise, it was a common problem for those in power. As the ruling class that stood at the top of the pyramid structure, they did not care about the lives of others. Even their blood relatives were no exception, not to mention the commoners who were like leeks that could be harvested at will. Chapter 1043. Dragging their exhausted bodies that had been tormented by the endless stairs, the three of them finally arrived at the library on the second floor of the tower. As soon as they stepped through the door, they were stunned by the scene in front of them. In a spacious and empty hall, there were huge bookshelves that were more than 5 meters tall. Each level was densely packed with thick and heavy books. Most importantly, by reading the constantly changing mysterious symbols on the spines of the books, anyone could instantly understand the meaning of these symbols. At the same time, they understood that among the thousands of books, there was not a single one that was repeated. Heavens, am I dreaming? The middle-aged man with the handlebar mustache could not help but gasp. His whole body trembled as he exclaimed. Compared to the pitifully small library of the Spellcaster Guild in the city, this was simply a sea of knowledge and books. It was the sacred temple of every magical explorer. No, you're not dreaming. This is the library, the place where countless powerful spells are recorded. Please hurry up, you only have 10 hours. Islands reminded them in a condescending and superior tone. Once upon a time, he did not hesitate to sacrifice his health and energy just to enter the library of the Spellcaster Guild. He repeatedly did the lowest and most menial work. But now he had completed a qualitative leap from quantitative change to qualitative change. He could stand at a higher place and look down on the other party. That kind of incomparable joy was transmitted to every corner of his body through his nerves. It was like drinking a glass of ice water in a scorching desert. It was completely indescribable. Isolt obviously noticed the attitude of his former apprentice. A trace of anger flashed in his eyes, but he quickly concealed it. Without a word, he grabbed a book and started flipping through it. At first, the three of them could still barely maintain their rationality and poise. But after a while, they completely forgot about everything around them. They were completely immersed in all kinds of profound magical theories, as well as a sea of spell models that they could not master in their lifetime. Madness. Hysterical madness. For a full 10 hours, no one ate, drank, rested. They did not even have time to copy notes. They just wanted to read a few more books and record a few more spells. When Islands loudly announced that the time was up, everyone couldn't help but tremble. Then, with intense unwillingness and regret, they slowly put the precious books back to their original places. The middle-aged man with a handlebar mustache knelt on the ground and cried bitterly, "God, why are you so cruel? You let me see the path to the supreme palace of magic with my own eyes, but you mercilessly closed it off. Sigh. The other person couldn't help but sigh. In contrast, although Isolt's wrinkled face was streaked with tears, he still managed to calm his turbulent emotions and said in an envious tone, "Islands, you're a lucky man. You're lucky enough to make all spellcasters jealous. I can foresee that as time passes, you will soon surpass all of us and become a true powerhouse. Here, I sincerely ask you to give us a chance to learn, no matter what price we have to pay." "Are you sure?" The young man pursed his lips and revealed a reserved smile. "Of course. Do you think a spellcaster would be able to resist the temptation of this library? No. If the guild's library is an addictive snuff, then this library is the purest narcotic sold in the black market. Losing the former would be unbearable, but losing the latter would make one want to die. I know that the Tower Master must be planning something. He needs some servants and assistants, and I'm willing to become one of them. As the saying goes, if one doesn't die, one will be a thief." Having gotten used to the scheming between spellcasters and nobles, Isolt immediately realized many things that he had overlooked before. Without thinking, he chose to betray the guild and his own hometown. "Oh, are you sure? You should know that this isn't something that can be done easily, and it's not something that can be done by simply swearing an oath." Islands hinted meaningfully. Isolt shrugged nonchalantly. "I'm not an idiot. I know what I'm doing. I also know how much risk I have to take. Come, tell me what I need to do. I'll prove my worth." "Count me in." "Me too." The other two hurriedly expressed their stance, their eyes blazing with the flames of ambition. Seeing this, Islands nodded in satisfaction. "Very good. I believe the Tower Master will be very satisfied with your current attitude. Since that's the case, I won't waste any more words. I'll give you your first mission. Incite the nobles to attack this tower." "What? You're crazy. Is there something wrong with my ears?" For a moment, the three of them reacted with either shock or disbelief. They simply couldn't believe that the Tower Master wanted to lure others to attack him. "No, I'm not crazy. I'm just conveying the Tower Master's will to you. Remember, the Master we're loyal to isn't an ordinary person. Don't use your way of thinking to guess his intentions. Just follow his orders obediently." After saying these words of warning, Islands ignored the three of them and went straight to the bookshelf. He picked up a book that he hadn't finished last time and began to read it with relish. The remaining three stared at each other in confusion. After exchanging glances, they quickly left the tower and began to walk back the way they came. As they walked, the middle-aged man with the handlebar mustache asked, "What do you think the Tower Master wants to do?" "I don't know. I don't want to know either. Anyway, our mission is to spread false information and make those greedy nobles think that they can achieve their goals through force. As for whether they live or die, it has nothing to do with us." Another person sneered with disdain. "That's right. From the moment we made up our minds to serve the Tower Master, everything in the world has nothing to do with us. No matter what he wants to do, whether it's destroying a city or a country, it doesn't matter to us. Only knowledge and power are our eternal pursuits. My friend, the door to the supreme palace of magic is already open. Nothing is more important than this." Isolt clenched the wooden staff in his hand tightly, his aged body seemingly bursting with endless energy. None of them knew that in the tower not far away, Zhang Cheng was monitoring their every move through primitive magic. He teased with a faint smile. What a familiar scene. All intelligent life in the universe, as long as they develop independent consciousness, selfishness and desire will be born and then slowly walk towards destruction. Since you're doomed to destruction, then I'll let you contribute to my experiment before you die. Chapter 1044. Betrayal was, in fact, not a very difficult thing to do. It was somewhat similar to a psychological barrier. Perhaps one would hesitate and struggle before crossing the red line, but once there was enough temptation or threat to one's life, one could easily cross it. Once the red line was crossed, there was no such thing as a bottom line for a person. There was no doubt that the moment Isolt made up his mind to become a renegade, he no longer regarded this city as his hometown, nor did he regard the tens of thousands of people living in the city as his compatriots. In his eyes, These were only the necessary price to pay to enter the supreme temple of magic. They were bargaining chips used to exchange for profound magical knowledge. When they returned to the Spellcaster Guild, the three of them worked together and fabricated a huge lie. They described Zhongcheng's tower as a place of dreams with countless precious materials, magical knowledge, and treasures. Most importantly, the defense was not as tight as the guild leader imagined. As long as there were enough troops and spellcasters, they could definitely conquer the tower and reap unimaginable rewards. However, as someone who was proficient in magical knowledge and techniques, Melrot was highly skeptical and refused to participate in this carnival of bandits. Unfortunately, there were very few people like him who retained their rationality. In less than 3 days, the local lord had gathered an army of 2,000 people and moved out in full force. Not only were there nobles who were eager to make a fortune, but there were also a few spellcasters, as well as a dozen so-called mercenaries and adventurers. This group of people carried the dream of making a fortune and headed straight into the depths of the forest, completely unaware of the terrifying monsters waiting for them ahead. Looking at the group that was gradually disappearing into the distance, Isolt stood on the tower and said to his 2 companions without turning his head, "We did it. Quickly send a message to the Tower Master. I believe he will be satisfied with our results." "Don't worry. The message was sent out a few hours ago. I was very curious. If they knew that they were actually just a wild dog and their target was a dragon, what kind of reaction would they have? Pain? Regret? Despair? Just thinking about it is interesting." A middle-aged man with a mustache stroked his chin, a cruel smile appearing on his face. "No matter what, they won't be able to come back alive. Now, let's move a little and make some preparations for the arrival of that lord." Another person glanced at the noisy crowd, his tone full of indifference and contempt. Just like the saying goes, fake devils are always more shameless, more despicable, more twisted, and more unscrupulous than real devils. Because they needed to prove to their new owners that they had made a clean break with their past, and that they were both fierce and useful dogs that could do many dirty things that their owners were inconvenient to do. At the same time, on the top floor of the tower in the depths of the forest, Zhang Cheng was sitting on his own chair, staring expressionlessly at islands. The young man held the news he had received not long ago in his hand and read it in a slightly low voice unhurriedly. "Tower Master, they had successfully deceived the nobles in the city and formed an army of over 2,000 soldiers. 1/3 of them were city guards, another 1/3 were the nobles' private army, and the remaining 1/3 were mercenaries, adventurers, and members sent by the various guilds. According to the intelligence, they seem to be carrying a lot of tools and parts necessary to make long-distance stone throwers." "Oh, stone throwers?" Zhang Cheng raised his eyebrows and revealed a meaningful smile. Islands obviously did not know what this smile meant, and hurriedly nodded. "That's right. Almost everyone knows that the magic tower has a very strong defensive power, so ordinary crossbows and frontal attacks are useless. The only thing that can destroy the internal structure is the stones thrown by the heavy stone throwers. I think that the Lord wants to use it to break open the entrance, and then let thousands of soldiers swarm in to win with numbers." "Haha, well explained. But they obviously don't know that they won't even be able to get close to the tower, and they will all die in the forest outside. Do you know? I'm actually conducting a great experiment, and I need many people to participate in this great experiment and give their lives for it." When Zhang Cheng said this, his eyes were fixed on the young man, and at the same time, he used his ability to directly probe his thoughts. As long as the other party showed the slightest sign of rejection, then his life would come to an end at that moment, and he would become a part of the experiment. But what was interesting was that Islands did not have the slightest bit of rejection. Instead, he put one hand on his chest and bowed, and with a slightly fanatical tone, replied, "I understand. To be able to give up their lowly lives for your great experiment is their supreme honor. Very good. You really did not disappoint me. Now, I've decided to give you a small reward, something that can change the magical aptitude of a mortal. Come, drink it, and then you will understand what is called a new life." Saying this, Zhang Cheng handed over a bottle of medicine that shone with violet light. This is. The young man took the crystal bottle with both hands, his whole body trembling uncontrollably. This was because even those who were least sensitive to energy could clearly sense the surging magical energy emanating from the violet liquid. Don't ask. Go back to your room and drink it. Although it may be a little painful at the beginning, as long as you get through it, you will feel a wonderful feeling that you have never felt before. Thank you for your benevolence and generosity. I swear that I will always follow in your footsteps and serve your great plan. I hope so. After the short conversation, Islands, who had long since been unable to suppress the excitement in his heart, immediately walked through the corridor and returned to his servant's room. He opened the stopper and carefully poured the violet liquid down his throat. The next second, a strong burning sensation flowed through his esophagus and into his stomach. Pain, tearing, swelling. In a short few seconds, the skin on the surface of his body showed a shocking red, and it emitted a scalding temperature. He only felt that every cell in his body was working in a way that exceeded their limits. But this pain came and went quickly. After about a minute, the burning sensation suddenly turned into an icy cold spring water that flowed to his limbs and brain. In an instant, Islands realized that his thoughts had become countless times broader than usual, and the magical energy stored in his body had also expanded countless times. It was as if he only needed a thought to trigger a violent energy resonance and vibration. Chapter 1045. Just as the young man was overjoyed by the unbelievable changes in his body, he did not realize that his every move was being monitored by someone else. What a cute little fellow. He's so naive to think that I need an assistant. No, I don't need an assistant. What I need is an experimental target with sufficient knowledge. Zhang Cheng muttered to himself with a smirk. There was no doubt that the liquid Islands had drunk was not a magical potion created by alchemy. Instead, it was a type of energy that borrowed the power of laws from the universe. Although it could greatly improve the user's physique and talent, it had a fatal flaw. The user's personality would become more and more crazy and irritable as time passed. Eventually, their self-awareness would completely collapse, and they would become a madman who only knew how to kill and destroy. No mortal could resist this chaotic energy that was absorbed from the universe. Even gods could be trapped in it and be unable to extricate themselves. As a dominator, especially one whose heart had completely merged with darkness, Zhang Cheng realized that it was much easier for him to sense and use this type of energy compared to other types of energy. Similarly, he was much more familiar with it. It was no wonder that the tentacle monster had invited him to join the Chaos faction. To a certain extent, Chaos, which originated from one of the three most primitive laws of the universe, was undoubtedly very much in line with his personality and taste. However, for some reason, he always felt that this energy seemed to have some sort of hidden danger. As a result, he always had a strong sense of vigilance in his subconscious and was unwilling to use it too much. This time, he wanted to test it on Islands and see just how terrifying the effects of the chaotic energy on mortals were. The poor young man still did not know that he had silently become a little white mouse that had entered the countdown to death. He was still constantly testing his potential. For example, he opened a book that he had never read before to see how long it would take him to memorize all the contents. Another example was to release some powerful spells that he had never been able to cast before. In short, he was like a child who had just received a new toy. His entire face was filled with excitement and joy. He did not realize that a mysterious energy had taken root and sprouted in his mind, slowly eroding his consciousness and soul. Although it was very slow, it was an irreversible process. Time flew, and 15 days passed in the blink of an eye. As his strength increased at a speed visible to the naked eye, Islands began to become irritable, and bloodthirsty. He would destroy the artificial maid who was in charge of daily cleaning if things did not go his way. Sometimes, in order to vent the burning masculinity in his heart, he would even enter the forest to hunt the monsters that were lurking in the surroundings or the wild beasts that accidentally barged in. Without a doubt, this change was exactly what Zhang Cheng wanted to see. And every once in a while, blood would be drawn to test the changes in the blood and genes. But when the army of 2,000 reached the forest outside the tower, he had to stop his research and turn his attention to another test. In order to figure out his strengths and weaknesses, he had created more than 10,000 little monsters that carried rule-bending power. At this moment, they were already lying in ambush in the path of the humans, patiently waiting for their creator to give the order to attack. "Master, can I teach them a little lesson?" Island smirked, his eyes flashing with undisguised malice. The power of chaos had begun to distort his personality and thinking. Anything related to killing, destruction would trigger a strong excitement in his subconscious. Zhang Cheng waved his hand without hesitation. "No, I won't. No need. I don't want to make them lose the courage to fight. How about this? You go cut off the escape route of this group of people. If anyone tries to turn around and run, I allow you to kill them all." "As you wish." The young man bowed and immediately cast a teleportation spell, disappearing on the spot. At the same time, the feudal lord who personally led the team seemed to have noticed that the surroundings were unusually quiet. He immediately gestured to the rangers who were in charge of scouting on both sides. The latter understood and quickly spread out to explore the periphery, trying to find any possible enemies. But before the 20 light cavalry in charge of scouting could run too far, the ground suddenly shook violently, and at the same time, there was a deafening sound. Boom! Dozens of bottomless trenches appeared on the ground without warning. Countless monsters covered in mud jumped out from the trenches and drowned the unprepared army like a tidal wave. Chaos. Chaos that could not be described with words. Due to the violent shaking of the ground, most of the warhorses were directly frightened and ran in all directions without the control of the riders. Some were more fortunate and fell off the back of their horses early, so there were no serious injuries. However, those unlucky fellows who didn't dismount their horses immediately either crashed into the branches of the trees in the forest, or they didn't hold onto their horses properly and fell off. As a result, they were trampled into meat paste by the horses behind them. In the blink of an eye, the army had lost almost all of their horses. Retreating had become an almost impossible task. The only thing the soldiers could do was to gather together as much as possible and barely form a defensive formation. For a moment, screams, shouts, roars, and the sound of officers giving orders were endless. The monsters that Zhang Cheng created were not stingy with their strange abilities. Every few minutes, someone would fall and never stand up again. The bewildered lord could not believe that his army was already on the verge of collapse and despair before he could even see the tower. If it was not for the fact that there was no way out and they could not surrender, these soldiers would have turned around and fled, or dropped their weapons and kneeled on the ground. My God, who can tell me? What the hell is going on? The leader's voice trembled as he questioned loudly. Sir, we were ambushed. I swear on my life. This is definitely premeditated. A knight who was not young at the side shouted in response. You mean the owner of the magic tower knew that we were coming? So he arranged all of this in advance? Maybe, maybe not. There is no point in discussing this now. If we want to live, we must gather as many soldiers as possible and then set up a defensive position. Otherwise, once it gets dark, we will definitely die without a burial ground. The knight panted heavily as he reminded with a nervous expression. Yes, gather the soldiers. Forward. There's a cliff over there. It should be a very good defensive position. Archers, fire straight. Spearmen, prepare to attack. Chapter 1046. The chaos and massacre lasted for a full 40 minutes, until the Thane retreated to a narrow cliff near the cliff with his remaining troops. He then used rocks and corpses to build a parapet, which barely stopped the monster's crazy attack. Smelling the thick smell of blood in the air, the Thane, whose face and armor were stained with blood, finally felt relieved. He asked without turning his head, "How many soldiers do we have that can fight now? If we count those who can still pick up weapons, we have about 500 people left. However, many of them are injured, and those who can still fight do not exceed 300 people. Most importantly, the chaos just now caused us to lose almost all of our supplies. Right now, we only have 3 days' worth of dry rations. Of course, this is not the worst. The worst thing is that the drinking water we have now can only last for 2 days at most. The slightly old knight lowered his voice and explained the current grim situation. It could be said that the sudden attack of the monsters had directly knocked down the originally high morale of the greedy people, who were full of desire for wealth and power, from the clouds to the bottom. Now, no one was thinking about plundering the priceless treasures in the tower. Instead, they were racking their brains to find a way to survive, because they knew that there was no other choice but to die if they stayed where they were. Not to mention other things, just the lack of water and food alone could make a person starve to death or die of thirst. In addition, outside the parapet, the fierce and brutal monsters did not leave. Instead, they patiently waited in the surroundings. In the dark forest, pairs of terrifying green eyes could be seen. Damn it! What should we do now? Wait for death. The Thane raised his fist and slammed it on the hard tree trunk. His face was full of resentment and unwillingness. Even in his dreams, he did not expect that his plan, which he was confident in, would have such a terrible accident at the last moment. Especially the monsters hiding in the forest. There were so many of them that it was impossible to count. If he knew that this place was so dangerous, he would not have risked his life to come here and end up like this. The knight shook his head helplessly. "I'm sorry, sir. I can't think of any way to help us get out of this situation. Perhaps you could try to communicate with the owner of the magic tower and see if you can ask him to let us go." Communicate? How do you want me to communicate with him? Tell him it was an accident, that we're not here to steal his property? Don't be silly. I can guarantee that the reason why he's dealing with us so unscrupulously is because he knows something. The Thane growled in a low voice. "But this is our only chance to survive, my lord. No matter what, you are a noble and the lord of a city. As long as you are willing to compromise to a certain extent, I don't think the other party will dare to do anything to you." The knight's eyes flashed with a strange light. Not only him, but all the surviving soldiers also looked at the Lord with similar gazes. Without a doubt, compared to the so-called glorious death in battle, they wanted to continue living, even if it was a lowly and humiliating life. Noticing this, the Thane's pupils suddenly shrank. With a face full of vigilance, he asked loudly, "What are you trying to do?" "I am your lord. My family and I have ruled this land for over 300 years. My lord, we have no intention of challenging your authority. We only hope to leave this damned place alive. No matter what, you are our leader. You should stand up and take responsibility at this critical moment, shouldn't you?" A guy who looked like the leader of the mercenaries stood up. One of his hands was tightly gripping the hilt of his sword, as if he could pull out his weapon at any time. Under normal circumstances, such threatening actions and words would cause the knights and guards to stand up immediately and shout loudly to arrest the other party. But this time, it was as if they were collectively blind. They deliberately pretended not to see anything and allowed the other party to approach the person they were loyal to. Although a few young men tried to stand up and stop them, they were stopped by their slightly older companions. For a moment, the surrounding atmosphere suddenly became quiet and strange to the extreme. Responsibility? The Thane narrowed his eyes and carefully sized up this small character that he would normally not care about. That's right, responsibility. It was you who caused this disaster. It was you who angered the powerful spellcasters in the magic tower. That's why we are in such a tragic situation. Now, there are 2 paths in front of you. One is to take the initiative to stand up and negotiate with the other party to ensure that the remaining people can return home. As for the other, naturally, we will chop off your head and use it to ask for the forgiveness of the Tower Master. As the leader of the mercenaries spoke, he slowly pulled out his blood-stained broadsword. His entire person was emitting a dangerous aura. Even an idiot could feel that he was definitely not joking. He was planning to put his words into action. After all, as mercenaries who lived on the edge of their blades, these fellows did not care about the dignity of the thing. As long as there was enough profit, They would even dare to plunder the manors of nobles. Anyway, the worst that could happen was that they could start over in a place where no one would recognize them. In this world where the transmission of information was very slow, about 200 to 300 kilometers away from a city could completely change the map. The chances of being recognized were so small that it was negligible. The Thane who was used to being high and mighty was obviously angered by the other party's attitude. He trembled all over and let out a cold laugh. Good, very good, very good. I will remember you, and all of you. After saying that, he glanced at the expressionless knights and soldiers around him. He turned around and strode over the parapet, shouting madly into the depths of the forest. My name is Kerwin Oren, the Thane of this land, the master of the tower. I now request a face-to-face negotiation with you. Negotiation? Zhang Cheng, who was far away on the top floor of the tower, heard this and immediately showed an interested expression. He ordered the young man who was waiting in the forest, Islands, go and see what is going on. Yes, master. After the young man sent the message, he immediately walked out from the depths of the forest slowly. Of course, he was not alone. There were thousands of monsters behind him. However, when he saw the familiar face of the Thane, he finally could not help but sneer and mock. Ah, I was wondering who it was. So it is the Honorable Thane. You are Islands, the lucky apprentice? Yes, but I am no longer an apprentice. Under the generous gift of the great master, the power I have is far beyond your imagination. Master, you have already joined the master of the tower? Why not? Anyone who has seen the master's power with their own eyes will become his most loyal servant and believer. Now, kneel down and let me see your respect and obedience to the master. Otherwise, I guarantee that you will not even have the chance to see him. Chapter 1047. Kneel? Ever since he inherited the title, Kerwin Oren had never knelt before anyone. He could not believe that an apprentice who did not even deserve to appear in the Lord's mansion was now arrogantly asking him to kneel. Shame, anger, and a trace of shame. Islands undoubtedly sensed the complicated emotions in the other party's eyes. He raised his chin slightly and spoke in a condescending tone. Why, do you feel humiliated that the noble Oren family has to kneel before a lowly merchant's son? Or do you think that master is not worthy of you kneeling to show your submission? Can you represent the master of the tower? Kerwin suppressed the anger in his heart and asked, Of course, I'm the only servant that master trusts now. You probably don't know, right? The 3 people who came here as representatives of the Spellcaster Guild had already pledged their loyalty to master. It's all thanks to the false information they spread that you and your idiotic subordinates could come here and provide enough material for a great experiment. As he said this, the young man pursed his lips subconsciously, showing an undisguised mockery. Although he did not know what Zhang Cheng's plan was and what the so-called great experiment was, he still did not know. But this did not stop him from showing a strong sense of superiority in front of outsiders. Just like the saying went, behind extreme arrogance, there was often an extreme sense of inferiority. Islands, who came from a lowly background, subconsciously craved respect and even reverence more than anyone else. Therefore, after suddenly obtaining powerful magical powers, it was inevitable that he would show his arrogant side. In fact, other than Zhang Cheng, he did not care about anyone else. What? You mean, Isolt is a traitor? The Lord's eyes widened, as if he could not believe what he heard. However, after calming down and thinking about it carefully, it was actually not that surprising. After all, from what happened not long ago, Isolt had obviously lied about the information. Not only did he lie, but he had also deliberately incited the greed of the nobles in the city. Traitor? No. They just made the right choice. As I said earlier, Master's strength is far beyond your imagination. The power he possesses is even greater than that of a god. Come, kneel down and show me your respect and obedience to our master. Otherwise, I can guarantee that none of you will leave this place alive. Islands gave his ultimatum. While he was speaking, tens of millions of monsters slowly left the cover of the forest in shadows. They stood openly under the sunlight, and there was no end in sight. With such a shocking number, not to mention the private army of a small border city. Even the elite guards under the direct command of the royal family could not help but tremble. Do you really want me to go to this extent? Kerwin, who had long since become a general without an army, had flames of anger in his eyes. Islands nodded without hesitation. Of course, the master only needs loyal and useful servants. If you can't do that, I don't mind killing all of you. Good. I will kneel. Enduring the indescribable humiliation, Kerwin finally bent his knees and knelt before the merchant's son under the gaze of countless pairs of eyes. Silence. Absolute silence. Even the mercenaries who forced him to take responsibility for the failure were stunned. However, Islands only showed a satisfied smile. Very good. Get up. Next, throw away the weapon in your hand and follow me closely. I'll bring you to see the master now. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly raised his right hand and began to chant loudly. In the blink of an eye, a short-distance teleportation portal appeared out of thin air and quickly disappeared. The moment the portal closed, the two people involved had already disappeared without a trace. Aside from the endless monsters that surrounded them, it was as if nothing had happened. With the strong pressure and dizziness, Kerwin, who had temporarily entered a state of weightlessness, could not help but fall to the ground as soon as his feet touched the ground. He covered his mouth desperately to prevent the contents of his stomach from rushing out of his throat. This was because he had already seen a handsome young man not far in front of him. The young man was sitting on a throne inlaid with gold and silver, looking down at him from above. The young man bowed respectfully and reported, "Master, this is the lord of the border town, Kerwin Oren. He said that he has something to say to you face to face." Lord? What a familiar word. Then tell me, my dear Lord Kerwin, what do you want to say to me? Zhang Chung tapped lightly on the armrest with a casual smile on his face. To be honest, after the chaotic battle not long ago, he had already obtained a lot of detailed data that he wanted. He was in good mood now. Otherwise, he would not waste time talking to this guy in front of him. Instead, he would let the monsters swarm and slaughter all the intruders to obtain more data. Respected Tower Master, I'm very sorry for being greedy and wanting to rob you of your wealth and treasures. I'm willing to pay a sufficient price in exchange for your forgiveness and benevolence. Calvin carefully raised his head and proposed. Price? Ha ha ha. Zhang Chen could not help but laugh out loud. He then pointed at the luxurious decorations in the room and asked, "Look at these treasures that are worth cities to you. What price do you think you have to pay to appease my anger?" I. After saying the word I 3 times in a row, Kerwin soon looked like a defeated rooster. He lowered his head and sighed helplessly. You are right. I can't afford this price. Yes, you can't. But I have an alternative plan here. I don't know if you're interested in sex. Zhang Chung crossed his hands and rested his chin on them. His body was leaning forward slightly, and his eyes revealed undisguised ridicule and playfulness. What alternative plan? Kerwin hurriedly grasped at the last straw. Very simple. Become a pawn in my great plan. Do you know? Recently, I have been looking for an agent to appear in front of me and start a war that will engulf the entire world. I believe that you have already seen the monsters that I have personally created outside. Think about it. If you have 100,000 or 1,000,000 of these monsters that are 100% obedient to your orders, won't you be able to defeat all your enemies, conquer large areas of rich land, and even build a huge empire? Zhang Cheng's voice was like a devil's, exuding an unparalleled temptation. Chapter 1048. You want me to become the enemy of the entire world? Kerwin's eyes widened, a look of disbelief on his face. Even in his wildest dreams, he did not dare to believe that this mysterious fellow in front of him would have such an arrogant and terrifying idea. Zhang Chung shrugged with a half-smile. Why not? Think about it. Those kings and dukes who are used to being at the top, when will they ever care about a rural noble like you who lives in a remote area? In their eyes, you're probably just an insignificant watchdog, used to protect the borders of the civilized world and resist the invasion of the barren lands. Don't tell me that you don't have the slightest urge to flip them over and stomp on them. Are you crazy? This kind of thing will never succeed. Kerwin could not help but retort loudly. As a lord, he might not be the smartest or the most cunning, but he was definitely the one who knew how to judge the situation. Thus, he was very clear about the difference in income between his own territory and that of the lords of the wealthier areas. And income meant more power. He could recruit elite soldiers at the warrior level to form an army and rope in a large number of spellcasters to work for him. A powerful army was, without exception, built with a sea of gold coins. With such a huge economic gap, it was simply a fool's dream to try to make up for the gap with numbers. After all, Kerwin had personally witnessed the bloody scene of tens of thousands of barbarians who lived in the depths of the swamp attacking the border fortresses, only to be slaughtered by a garrison of less than 3,000 people. If he were to turn against the kingdom, he wouldn't end up well either. How do you know it won't work if you haven't tried? Trust me, as long as you nod, I will provide you with endless troops. 100,000, 1,000,000, 10 million. In the face of absolute numbers, your enemy will not be much stronger than a newborn baby. Furthermore, I promise to bestow upon you power, the legendary great hero who can fight against 10,000 alone. Zhang Cheng undoubtedly sensed the thoughts in Kerwin's mind and took the initiative to increase the bargaining chip. No matter what, he had to maintain a quiet and mysterious atmosphere. He could not be discovered by the rulers, or trouble would soon follow. But doing this will cause me to lose the foundation of my rule. Control monsters? What do you think most civilians will think of me? They will view me as their enemy and would rather choose to flee than live in my territory. Kerwin clenched his fists and gritted his teeth as he voiced his greatest resistance. There was no other way. Almost all intelligent life forms live together as a basic unit. They recognized each other's bloodline, identity, culture, religion, and habits, but at the same time, they would instinctively reject other races that were incompatible with them. Not to mention the otherworldlings. Even the different branches of intelligent life forms were likely to hate each other. Therefore, once the ruler began to manipulate another species to slaughter their own kind, the people would immediately develop extremely strong negative emotions. It would not be surprising if a riot occurred and the current ruling class was overthrown. Zhang Cheng, of course, knew the consequences of doing so. He leaned forward slightly and said in a very low voice, "What does it matter? If those foolish civilians tried to escape, they would be punished by the law of collective punishment. If one person tried to escape, their entire family would be killed. If one family tried to escape, they would kill 10 of their neighbors. Guess, in the face of the threat of death, would they choose to report the person who tried to escape, or would they be willing to sacrifice the lives of their family and friends to protect the person who tried to escape? You're a devil." Kerwin's voice trembled as he finally realized what kind of person he was dealing with. Evil, darkness, tyranny, cruelty. Most importantly, the other party didn't try to hide anything from the beginning to the end. He did not dare to imagine how such a terrifying person could exist in this world. How did the other party cultivate such a dark personality? Devil? Ha ha. No, my dear Kerwin, the word devil does not suit me. All right, now tell me your choice. Do you want to accept the fact that you are my agent, or do you want to be forced to accept it? Zhang Cheng laughed as he gave the ultimatum. In fact, if it was not for the sake of making things more interesting, he could have modified the memory or even created a perfect clone to replace the Lord in front of him. But that would be too boring, and there would be no way to pass the time, so it was more interesting to keep this person with the hidden danger of betrayal. I'm willing to be your agent. Kerwin struggled for a moment in his heart, but in the end, he lowered his head and chose to compromise. He didn't want to die. He didn't want the family that had been passed down for hundreds of years to end in his generation. A wise choice. Congratulations, you've made the right decision. Time will prove everything. In order to express my sincerity, I will show you something to increase your confidence. With that, Zhang Cheng waved at the young man standing next to him. Islands, show him around. As you wish, master. The young man put his hand on his chest and bowed slightly, then dragged Kerwin, who was like a walking corpse, and disappeared at the corner of the stairs leading to the lower level. Listening to the sound of footsteps gradually fading away, Zhang Cheng pursed his lips and muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "Since I already have an agent. The next step is to start a war on this planet and use blood and death to test my control of the rules of the universe. As for whether the life on this planet will be extinct or not, it will depend on their luck." At the same time, the remaining troops that were stuck on the cliff were still anxiously waiting for news. As the sky became darker and darker, they began to feel a strong sense of uneasiness and fear in their hearts. The monsters that constantly roamed outside the parapet gave everyone a lot of pressure, coupled with the fact that there was nothing to use as fuel to light a bonfire to dispel the darkness. The more the sky darkened, the more nervous everyone became. "Damn it, do you think the Lord will abandon us?" A young soldier couldn't help but ask. "Shut up. Don't ask what you shouldn't ask," the veteran next to him reprimanded. "But it's been so long since he left. Even if it's a negotiation, there should be a result, right? Child, don't presume to guess the mind of a powerful spellcaster. Their thinking is not the same as normal people. Be patient. As long as the Lord is not an idiot, he will be able to reach an agreement with them." "Not good. Look, what is that?" A sharp-eyed mercenary suddenly stood up and pointed at a huge shadow slowly rising from the forest in the distance. Chapter 1049. As the sky was too dark, most people couldn't see clearly what the huge black shadow was. The only thing they could be sure of was that it was abnormally huge, at least the size of a castle. There were two balls of flames flickering in front of it, giving off an extremely eerie and terrifying feeling. "Oh my God! What? What is that? Monster! Damn it! It's coming towards us!" For a moment, everyone stood up nervously, gripping the weapons in their hands tightly. Although they knew very well that the weapons in their hands might not even be able to hit the enemy, they still tried to find some comfort in their hearts. Some people even set up the few giant ballistae they had, aiming at the approaching huge shadow. This was the only weapon they could use against the air. However, when a huge shadow finally came close, everyone fell into endless despair. This was because this huge shadow was none other than a huge dragon that emitted a rotten and deathly aura. To be precise, it was a plague dragon, a war machine that was pieced together with the most advanced necromancy and countless monster corpses. Normal weapons could not cause any fatal damage to it. On the contrary, it only needed to spit out a mouthful of poisonous plague smoke to kill all living things within a few hundred meters. "How is it? Do you have a new understanding of the great master's power now?" Alan stood on the dragon's back and asked with a faint smile. "Of course. With this corpse dragon, we can easily take down a country's capital." Kerwin waved his right arm vigorously, unable to contain the excitement in his heart. "Remember, don't try to betray the master. I'll keep an eye on you." Alan's narrowed his eyes and warned. Kerwin nodded without hesitation. "I understand. Don't worry. After seeing this with my own eyes, do you think I'll be stupid enough to betray him?" "I hope so. You must know that mortals are always full of arrogance and stupidity. They think they can do great things that others can't, and they are very easily influenced by low-level desires and emotions." When he said this, Island's tone revealed a faint trace of mockery. "No, my friend. You're talking about youths, adventurers, and mercenaries with all kinds of delusions in their minds. They will never be lords and nobles like me. Do you know? I only look at things from the perspective of benefits. As long as it benefits me, I'll agree. If it harms me, I'll oppose it. Now, who in the world do you think can give me such good conditions? Who would be willing to support me in expanding my territory and building a huge empire?" Kerwin asked meaningfully. When Islands heard this answer, he only laughed contemptuously and pointed. He pointed at the terrified soldiers below. "What do you plan to do with these traitors?" Kerwin replied, "It's very simple. Let them taste pain and despair, until you realize how serious your mistake is." "Very, but I like it." Without any hesitation, Islands raised his hand and shot out a blinding red light. When the monsters in the forest saw this, they immediately rushed out as if they had gone mad. One by one, They jumped over the parapet and threw the remaining soldiers to the ground. They used their sharp teeth and claws to tear open their throats. No mercy, no mercy, no forgiveness. In less than 10 minutes, the death toll had reached more than 50%, and none of the corpses could be considered to be in good condition. They were either missing an arm or a leg, and some were even gnawed to the point that only a bloody white skeleton was left. Any normal person who saw this would feel their scalp go numb. In more serious cases, they might even have a mental breakdown. As the number of survivors decreased and the resistance grew weaker, Kerwin finally spoke. Enough. Stop. I think they've been taught a lesson. Stop now. Are you sure you're not joking? These people have been scared out of their wits. Even if they survive, they won't have the courage to stand on the battlefield and kill the enemy. Island snorted, a look of disdain on his face. No, you don't understand. I don't need these people to return to the battlefield. I only need them to control and manage more normal people. Only by engraving fear and respect in the depths of their souls will they understand the price of betrayal. Only then will they be able to ensure absolute loyalty. Come, let me down. It's time for me to perform. With that, Kerwin combed his hair that had been messed up by the wind and quickly got into his role. As an adult noble, he had many masks in his daily life. Some were gentle husbands, some were kind fathers, and some were strict monarchs. If the situation called for it, he could change at any time. Boring tricks. Although Islands had no interest in this at all, he still controlled the huge plague dragon to descend from the sky and land in front of the soldiers who were on the verge of collapse. With the help of the terrifying aura emanating from the dragon, Kerwin had a faint smile on his face. He stepped on the sticky puddles of blood on the ground and went straight to the soldiers who didn't know what to do. With a slightly sarcastic tone, he said, I'm sure many of you didn't expect me to come back alive, right? This is all your revenge? The mercenary leader from before trembled as he questioned. Revenge? No, of course not. Don't think of me as a lowly person like you. I'm not doing this for revenge, but to teach you fear and respect. Especially when faced with an enemy that can never be defeated, the best way is not to stubbornly resist to the end, but to choose to join the other side. Now, I've sworn to be loyal to the master of the magic tower. Who among you is willing to follow me to war with the other lords and build an eternal empire? There were no flowery words of boasting, nor was there any concealment of his inflated ambitions. Kerwin used the simplest and most direct method to make a proposal to these defeated soldiers who were scared out of their wits. It was a proposal that couldn't be refused. Based on the current situation, even a fool could see that those who refused would definitely become food for the monsters. Thus, only by accepting it could they ensure their survival. As for whether they would betray in the future, they could slowly consider it after they survived. No one had noticed that a seed called fear had been planted in their subconscious. This seed would be firmly buried in the bottom of their hearts, and every time they wanted to betray, they would recall the cruel scene before them. Chapter 1050. The world of adults was not like the imaginations of many youths, where they did not have to make a choice. On the contrary, most of the time they did not have a choice. They could only choose between the worst and the worst. Obviously, for the surviving soldiers whose lives were threatened, the only thing they could do was to accept the Lord's conditions and become the claws and accomplices of the evil forces. When Kerwin returned to the city with tens of thousands of monsters, every resident felt a strong sense of unease. Even though they could not pinpoint what was wrong, and the ferocious monsters did not attack any civilians, the constant patrolling of the streets and alleys inevitably caused panic to spread rapidly. In less than 2 or 3 days, hundreds of people chose to flee with their belongings. The remaining people closed their doors and windows, and the bustling market became desolate. However, as the Lord, Kerwin did not seem to care about the people in his territory. Instead, he shut himself in the castle and ignored everything that happened outside. However, no one knew that he had quietly gathered Isolde and the other two, and was plotting to get rid of the chairman of the Spellcaster Guild, Melrod. How was it? Did you inform me about this operation? Kerwin narrowed his eyes and asked directly. It's hard to say. You should know that Melrod is no ordinary spellcaster. At the age of 30, he was already a renowned expert in magic. Even many old fogies have nothing but praise for him. If you want to get rid of him, you'll have to cut off his connection with magic energy first. The simplest way is to poison him. Isolt replied with a sinister look. Poison? Kerwin frowned subconsciously. You mean to say that I need to hold a banquet and invite many people to attend, and take the opportunity to poison his food? Isolt nodded without hesitation. That's right. From what I know, Melrot does not like to drink strong alcohol. He usually only drinks mild wine or absinthe. In addition, he likes charming women above the age of 28. My suggestion was to find a noble lady who could arouse his desires and feed him the poisoned wine mouth to mouth to minimize his vigilance. As for the excuse of holding a banquet, why don't we use the loot from the magic tower as bait? Are you stupid? Almost everyone in the city saw how disheveled we were when we returned. No one will believe that I have gained anything from the magic tower. Calvin retorted angrily. It wasn't that he didn't want to show off, but he really couldn't. It must be noted that a few days ago, when he returned with this group of defeated soldiers, almost all of them were dejected and spiritless like walking corpses. The armor and weapons on their bodies were also tattered and covered in blood. If it weren't for the fact that the tens of thousands of monsters around were 100% obedient, the guards at the city gates might have refused to let their lord into the city. In fact, there had been quite a few rumors circulating recently. More than half of them were guessing what the expeditionary army had encountered and why so few people had returned alive. There were even family members of the victims who were desperately trying to find out whether their relatives and friends were alive or dead. Unfortunately, those who had experienced the tragic massacre chose to remain silent without exception. They didn't dare to reveal even the slightest bit of information. This was because they knew that if they dared to reveal even the slightest bit of the truth, they would be discovered by the wandering monsters in the city. They would then be dragged into a deserted alley and torn to pieces. No, my dear lord. It doesn't matter if others believe it or not. What matters is whether Melrot is willing to believe it or not. Don't forget that he is a guy who is extremely obsessed with magical knowledge and power. As long as there are some clues and evidence, he will definitely not miss it. The middle-aged man with the handlebar mustache hinted meaningfully. But I have no evidence. No clues at all. Hee. It doesn't matter if you don't have it. What we have is enough. You? Oh, I know. You have also received generous gifts from the Tower Master. Yes. Although it isn't much, it is enough to deal with Melrot. All right. Then I will prepare the banquet and the poison. I will leave the invitation to you. Just as these traders were discussing how to murder a powerful spellcaster, Zhang Cheng, who was far away in the depths of the forest, had already hollowed out a few thousand meters underground and built a huge maze. It was densely packed with monsters created using the power of laws. Looking at the pairs of eyes that emitted a strange light in the darkness, he couldn't help but smile and sigh. It really wasn't easy. Finally, it's all done. Not only did I have to control the upper limit of the energy, but I also had to ensure that every individual was infused with the power of laws. Even for me, it was quite a challenge. However, in order to carry out the test without being discovered by the outside world, it was worth it. As soon as he finished speaking, Island suddenly cast a teleportation spell and appeared on the spot. He placed one hand on his chest and bowed slightly. Master, the things you asked me to prepare last time have been completed. May I send it to Lord Kerwin now? Oh, so fast. Zhang Cheng was shocked. He turned around and looked at the youth who was emitting a cold and ruthless aura. The youth smiled and took the initiative to explain. This is all thanks to your generosity. The knowledge recorded in the library is too rich. No matter what kind of problem or trouble you encounter, as long as you look up the corresponding books, you can immediately find the solution. In addition, when making this thing, I also discovered an interesting phenomenon, and that is the conversion between opposing energies. The so-called good and evil are not as incompatible as people think, but can be exchanged under certain conditions. You really didn't disappoint me. You actually discovered the essence of magic energy so quickly. Zhang Cheng quickly hid his true emotions and raised his hand to pat the youth's shoulder. Without a doubt, Islands' talent in magic was far better than he had imagined. To be more precise, he was a one-in-a-million genius. However, this kind of genius was not like ordinary magic talent, which could be shown quickly with a little learning. Instead, it needed a long time to settle down before it would finally emit a dazzling light like a gem. Thank you for your praise. I swear to continue working hard and not let you down. The youth did not realize what the talent he had unintentionally shown meant. He still maintained his respect for his master. Chapter 10:51. Islands, I have to say that you've given me a pleasant surprise. Perhaps it's time to impart to you some real knowledge about the nature of magic. Come, follow me. I'll demonstrate to you how a truly powerful spellcaster controls energy, allowing it to distribute, reorganize, and shape according to his will. As Zhang Cheng spoke, he cast a teleportation spell and arrived at the surroundings of a spacious forest on the surface. He did not waste any time and directly raised his right hand to make a grasping motion. The next second, boom, a huge palm suddenly emerged from the ground and tightly grasped a pitiful big wild boar in its palm. It then continuously squeezed and finally crushed it, turning it into a sky full of blood and minced meat. After doing all this, he turned around and asked, "So, tell me, what did you feel? You didn't chant a spell, nor did you have any complicated casting movements. You almost completed the capture of energy and the spell structure in an instant." Allens gave his answer in an uncertain tone. Because everything had happened too quickly, he couldn't figure out what had happened. After all, talent was one thing, experience was another. Until now, this young man had not experienced a real battle between spellcasters, so it was not surprising that he could not tell the main point. Zhang Qing undoubtedly expected this situation and shook his head with a faint smile. No, you didn't grasp the main point. For spellcaster, no matter the better the spell or the casting movements, the essence is to control energy and construct the spell model as fast as possible. If one day you can directly affect the energy itself without the help of external forces, then you can skip the tedious movements and jerky incantations and release all the magic in an instant like me. You mean, I also have such talent? Allens was not a fool and immediately understood the subtext. An excited and shocked expression appeared on his cold face. Yes, you do have such talent. But remember, although talent is very important in the process of learning magic, focus and hard work are equally important. I can provide you with the best resources, but I can't help you understand the true essence of magic. You can only rely on yourself. Zhang Cheng gave a rare, encouraging speech. But if one looked closely, they would notice a flash of playfulness in his eyes. That's right, it was playfulness. This was because he had found another interesting toy. Due to his dark nature, he was very keen on cultivating a genius and then personally destroying them, tasting the extreme emotions of the other party when they fell from hope to despair. Only at this moment would the soul of a mortal explode with the most direct and most beautiful scene. It had to be said that this was very evil and also very cruel. Except for a few special cases, after being strangled, there are almost no mortals who could stand up again and complete their revenge. However, in Zhang Cheng's eyes, this was just a small game used to kill time, a game that interfered with and controlled the fate of others. Understood. Thank you for your guidance. I will do my best. Lawrence's eyes were filled with gratitude. No one knew better than him what this sentence meant. It meant that his path to the supreme palace of magic had been illuminated by a bright light. The only thing he needed to do was to keep walking down this path without any crossroads or wrong directions. At the same time, in the castle of a small border town, a banquet full of murderous intent had quietly begun. As the host and organizer, Kerwin raised his wine glass and said a toast, and soon announced the official start of the banquet. Accompanied by the cheerful music played by the band, some of the guests gathered together to discuss the recent abnormal situation in the city, as well as the monsters roaming the streets. There were also people holding hands as they stepped onto the dance floor, enjoying a rare moment of relaxation. No one noticed that a maid had quietly stuffed a small bottle of light yellow liquid into the mouth of a 28-year-old noble lady who exuded a mature and seductive aura. This upper-class lady was wearing a light purple low-cut chiffon dress today. Her long black hair was draped over her shoulders like a young girl. She was like a blooming rose, constantly attracting those men who were exuberant with their hormones. But what was interesting was that she was not the least bit interested in those who came to her door to curry favor. Instead, she took the initiative to walk in front of the leader of the Spellcaster Guild, raised her wine glass, and asked with a smile, "Dear Master, I wonder if you have the time to answer a few questions about magic for me?" "You are." The old man's lips curled up slightly, revealing an interested expression. No matter what, he was still an important figure in this city. Although he was old, he still often had romantic encounters. This was not the first time he had encountered such a situation, and he was very experienced. "My name is Melissa, the wife of Baron Kellenst." The woman held her chest and curtsied. This was originally an ordinary etiquette, but when she used it, it was simply seducing others to commit a crime, causing the blood of all the men who saw it to flow faster. Even Merat felt that his old heart was filled with energy once again. He subconsciously licked his lips and replied, "Of course. Madam Melissa, I am very happy to answer your questions about magic. But there seems to be more people in the hall. Perhaps we can go to a room at the back with fewer people?" "As you wish." The woman who called herself Melissa pretended to be playful and blinked her eyes. She quickly threw the wine glass to the maid and tiptoed into the dark corridor that led to a separate room at the back. "Aha! Another beautiful, noble lady who has fallen at your feet, isn't it?" Isolt suddenly stood out from the crowd and teased with a slightly envious tone. "What, are you jealous? Don't worry, my dear friend. If you're interested, I can teach you a few tricks in private. You must know that the reason I am so popular is not only because of my identity as the leader of the Spellcaster Guild, but also because of some little secrets that no one knows." Mara was obviously in a good mood and did not forget to joke around. "Forget it, I'm not like you. My mentality is already old, and I don't have the energy to play games with these thirsty noble ladies. Also, don't forget to end the battle quickly. His lordship is still waiting for you to read the book you obtained from the Magic Tower. Believe me, you will be filled with astonishment at the knowledge recorded in it. Of course, my attitude towards magic has always been very sincere. I will be back in half an hour at most. Then I wish you a good time in advance." "Ha ha ha. Thank you. I have a feeling that today will be a wonderful night." Chapter 1052. Wine and women were one of Melrit's few hobbies. At the same time, it was a way for him to relieve his stress and vent the negative emotions he had accumulated. Because only when the primitive flames of desire were completely ignited would he temporarily remove his disguise and reveal his truest and most unknown side. No restraints, no oppression. It was as if his body had returned to the time when he was young, enjoying unparalleled pleasure. Because he was too engrossed, he did not notice that the wine he had drunk while flirting had already caused an extremely unique poison to spread throughout his body, through his digestive system and blood. Right now, his connection with magical energy had been completely severed. He was no longer the formidable spellcaster he once was, but a slightly older old man. There was no doubt that for an old man who had entered his twilight years, and whose various organs were beginning to deteriorate, half an hour of tormenting with a lady in her prime was undoubtedly a very exhausting task. When Melrat struggled to get up from the bed, the night sky was already filled with countless stars. It was a mysterious and beautiful sight. Feeling the soreness and fatigue of his muscles after the strenuous exercise, he could not help but sigh slightly, bitterly grumbling in a low voice. "Time really doesn't spare anyone. I never thought that there would be a day when I'm powerless." However, grumbling was just grumbling. He had no intention of continuing to waste time here. He quickly put on his clothes and turned to leave, not once turning to look at the seductive figure on the bed. To Melrat, women were just disposable items to adjust his lifestyle. After using them, he would casually throw them away and not spend too much effort on them. Only magical knowledge and power were the things that he pursued all his life. However, The old man did not notice that the moment he left, the charming lady on the bed quickly opened her eyes. She smoothed her messy hair and sneered at the wardrobe not far away. "Come out. I know you're here." Just as she finished speaking, the tightly shut wardrobe door creaked open, and a middle-aged man with a mustache walked out. He was none other than the spellcaster who had chosen to side with Zhang Cheng along with Isolt. This fellow first looked around, and after confirming that Melrod had left, he relaxed a little and asked carefully, "How was it? Did you feed him the poison?" "Of course. He's just a lecherous old man. Do you think he can resist my charm?" Melissa pursed her lips and revealed a sinister smile. "No, madam, Chairman Melrod is no ordinary old man. His strength is so great that even his lordship is wary of him. If this matter is really done, I guarantee that you will get what you desire." The middle-aged man narrowed his eyes, his gaze wandering unscrupulously over the other party's naked body. How do I know when you will fulfill your promise?" Melissa obviously did not care about being watched by the opposite sex, as she stood up and sneered. "Don't be impatient. Please be patient. We're not profiteers that would go back on our word for a little bit of profit. On the contrary, the things you value are worthless in our eyes." After saying that, the middle-aged man didn't care if the other party understood his hint. He turned around and walked into the wardrobe, disappearing without a trace through the secret passage. Hearing the sound of footsteps gradually fading away, Melissa couldn't help but raise the corner of her mouth slightly. She muttered to herself in a voice that only she could hear, "Interesting. Is this an internal power struggle between the Spellcaster Guild? Or is his lordship trying to do something big?" Unfortunately, no one could answer her question. At the same time, in another room in the castle, Lord Kerwin and Isolt were playing chess while patiently waiting for the result. After all the arrangements that could be made had been made. As for whether it would succeed or not, it was up to fate. Especially since they had seen Zhang Cheng, they knew how powerful their new master was. Even if this operation failed, they didn't have to worry too much. After all, the one who would die in the end would be Melrod. Just as Kerwin picked up a chess piece and was about to take a step forward, light footsteps suddenly sounded in the corridor. Then, the wooden door was suddenly pushed open. The next second, Melrod slowly walked in from outside with his walking stick. He looked very tired, his eyes slightly swollen. He no longer looked as smart and capable as he usually did. There is no doubt that this was one of the signs of a spellcaster being cut off from magic energy. However, he had just engaged in an intense battle, so he hadn't realized what the changes in his body meant. A trace of undetectable joy flashed in Kerwin's eyes. He hurriedly stood up and greeted, "Good evening, master. I heard that you had a wonderful night with Baron Kellenst's beautiful wife. How enviable." "Ha ha. I hope the Baron doesn't find out about this, or he'll be very angry." Melrod joked with a laugh, completely unaware that his life was about to end. "Yes, if the Baron finds out, he'll definitely go crazy. He might even draw his sword and duel with you." While many nobles don't mind their wives fooling around with other men, Baron Kellenst is an exception. He's an old-fashioned and skilled warrior. He definitely won't tolerate any disloyalty. Before Kerwin could finish his words, a man covered in heavy armor and wielding a long sword and shield barged in. Without a word, he raised his weapon and stabbed at Melrod. Asterisk, even though the latter had sensed the danger ahead of time and tried to dodge, his abdomen was still cut open. Dark red blood instantly dyed his dark blue robe red. "Go to hell. Trash! How dare you lay your hands on my wife? Today, I'll tear you to pieces." The intruder roared angrily, and the metal shield smashed into Melrot's face. The old man was flung away, crashing into the hard granite wall. He spat out another mouthful of blood, and the wound on his abdomen split open to reveal his intestines. "Ah, what did I say just now? Don't let the Baron find out about this, or he'll definitely be angry." See, now it's come true. Seeing Melrot heavily injured in a single exchange, Kerwin knew that the outcome was set. He stood at the side and pretended to be innocent as he made sarcastic remarks. Chapter 10:53. Damn it. Magic. My magic actually... Melrot could no longer be bothered with the sarcastic remarks. He clutched his bleeding abdomen as he endured the pain and tried to cast a spell, only to find that his connection with the energy had been completely severed. To be more precise, there was a kind of poison that was constantly flowing in his blood vessels, blocking the resonance between his mana and energy. This also meant that all the powerful spells couldn't be released at this moment. Helpless, he could only overdraw his mana and shoot out a ball of bone-chilling frost, forcing Baron Kellens to take 2 steps back as he tried to cut him in half. "Don't struggle, my dear President. Haven't you felt it yet? This is the poison gland of a silt worm from the depths of the Great Swamp. It can cut off the connection between all living things and magic. Just a little bit is enough to turn a powerful spellcaster into a cripple. Unfortunately, there's quite a bit of it in the wine you drank. It's enough to ensure that you won't be able to cast a single spell for the next 3 hours." Isolde hinted with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He didn't know why, but he didn't feel the slightest bit of sympathy for the president who'd always been above him. Instead, he felt an inexplicable sense of pleasure. That's right, it was pleasure. Even though he knew it was a negative emotion born from jealousy, he couldn't help but feel exhilarated. It was as if he'd vented all the resentment he'd suppressed for so many years. It's you. You're plotting against me?" Melrot wasn't too stupid and immediately realized the conspiracy behind the whole thing. His eyes were filled with intense doubt and confusion. He didn't understand at all why these fellows who had no enmity with him would suddenly gang up on him and act so viciously, intending to kill him. One had to know that the atmosphere between the nobles in this world had always been open. Normally speaking, if something happened between a married woman, it wouldn't lead to a fight. In some places, the nobles would even use the number of men they had played with as a standard of popularity. Interestingly, however, the law protected marriage behind the spread of this culture. Husbands had the right to retaliate against men who violated their own pawns. That meant that even if Baron Kellens killed Melrot, there wouldn't be any legal issues. It would be within the realm of reason. It was clear that from the moment he met the beautiful Lady Melissa, he had already fallen into the trap set up by someone else. Following that, as his desire soared, he silently drank the poison wine. "That's right. Make us. As for the reason, it's because you're too much of a hindrance. You could easily cause accidents in our future plans, so we have to get rid of you first." Kerwin calmly raised his glass and took a sip of the dark red wine. "Get in the way? What are you planning?" Melrot gritted his teeth and questioned loudly. Kerwin shook his head gently. "I'm sorry, I can't tell you because my master doesn't allow it." "Well, enough with the nonsense. Baron, kill him." "As you wish, my lord." Baron Kellens took a step forward and swung his sword against the flames, causing a head to roll to the ground. Glaring blood spurted a few meters into the air before the headless corpse fell to the ground with a thud. "It's easier than expected, isn't it?" Kerwin's eyes shone with a strange light. Without a doubt, he enjoyed the feeling of being in control of life and death, especially when the other party was the chairman of the Spellcasters Guild that he once feared. Isolde mocked. "Of course it's easy, but do you know how hard it is to get a bottle of siltworm poison? I spent a whole 25,000 gold coins to buy it from the black market. Now that Melrot is dead, let's carry out our agreement. From today onwards, you'll be in charge of the army and the Dominion. We'll be in charge of magic. We won't interfere with each other." "No problem. This is my master's arrangement. I won't go against his orders. However, you have to provide magic support for my army. After all, it's not easy to start a war with a nation. Without magic, those monsters won't be able to withstand the might of the court's spellcasters." Kerwin quickly proposed the terms of the exchange. "All right, but don't make too big of a move at the start. Let's set a smaller target, the Western Province. There are few people here, and most of the nobles are independent. As long as we act quickly, we can completely take control of the place before the royal family can react," Isolde suggested. "Not a bad suggestion. I'll consider it." At this point, Kelvin turned and looked at Kieran, who was staring at the green grassland above him. "Baron, thank you and your wife for your assistance. I promise you'll get what you want when the invasion officially begins. When the time comes, I'll give you an army to personally kill your enemies and wash away the shame of your family with their blood. Asterisk bang. Asterisk Baron Kellner slapped his armor hard and knelt on one knee. I swear, as long as you help me complete my revenge, I'm willing to be loyal to you for life and never betray you. I accept your loyalty. Go, take your wife home. There might be bloodshed in the city in the next few days. Don't get involved for now. Understood. Melrot's death meant many things. The most obvious was that the Spellcasters Guild had fallen into the hands of Isolde and his accomplices. Apart from that, Kerwin had finally made his move. He began to clean up those who refused to serve him wholeheartedly one by one. In less than a week, more than 500 people had been publicly executed in the city. 2,000 had mysteriously disappeared. He used the most iron-fisted method to integrate all the resources and forces in his territory. Coupled with the endless stream of monsters that came from the Magic Tower and arrived outside the city walls, an army that could wipe out the entire western province was ready to set out. When the seasons began to change, the city that had been completely transformed into a war machine finally reached out its claws to its nearest neighbor. Under the cover of the night, more than 5,000 monsters took a detour around the main road and advanced through the dense forest. They took advantage of a moment of carelessness and launched a surprise attack, ushering in their first victory with blood and death. Slaughter. Merciless slaughter. To ensure that he could rule effectively, Kerwin didn't keep any noble captives. He killed his uncle's entire family, leaving only the young noble women as spoils of war for himself and his important vassals to enjoy.